Chapter 104. A ferocious gleam flashed in Wu Qi's eyes as he said with a ferocious voice, "A man has no intention to hurt a tiger, but a tiger will hurt a man. Instead of being beaten passively, why not take the initiative to tear off a piece of meat from Wei clan? With your current status and identity, as long as you can stabilize the power of Duke Yen Lu and Zhuguezheng, with the current emperor as the decision-maker, Wei clan won't be able to do anything to us. With the power of heaven-breaking sword sect, do you think we can't deal with a merchant clan?" Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng exchanged a glance. This girl who looked like a dark orchid had really given them the courage to refuse. Which was more important, the state or the beauty? Sighing lightly, Wu Qi straightened his body and said with a gentle voice, "Grandmaster Yu, please tell me." A girl who was known as the #1 beauty in her clan since she was young, was willing to sacrifice everything for the man she loved, the man who was known as the divine dragon among men. For the sake of his so-called great event, the girl who had a deep love for the man since she was young had been wandering around the world, playing different roles, playing out scenes of joys and sorrows, witnessing the rise and fall of one hero after another. On the wooden platform in the center of the lake in the backyard, Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng were sitting cross-legged on the ground. With a subtle expression, Lu Chengfeng was sizing up Wu Qi from top to bottom. The teacup in his hand was still full, and not even a drop of tea had been touched. Grumpily, Wu Qi gulped down 3 bowls of fragrant tea, then glared at Lu Chengfeng and said, "If you have something to say, then say it. If not, finish your tea and go rest. Hee, the emperor is personally selecting the soldiers. If you can't produce any results within a year, you'll have to go into secluded cultivation." The figure amidst the strong wind was none other than the Grandmaster of Zither, Yu Tan, who was clad in a white cloak and had her face covered with a white veil. She was the one who asked the 3 questions during the celebration banquet in the imperial palace, which had dispersed all the influential members and ministers in the imperial court and nearly made Princess Zhang Le kill someone out of anger. It was late at night, and like a female ghost, she suddenly appeared in the backyard of Duke Yen Li's mansion together with a whirlwind. Wu Qi had no idea what she was doing here. Under the bright green moonlight, Yu Tan, who had taken off the bamboo hat, looked like a dark orchid that had bloomed quietly in a deep valley, exposing her graceful, gorgeous, and beautiful visage to Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng. This was an impeccable appearance, with a thick sweetness and a warm fragrance. Just by looking at her, it gave people the illusion that they were surrounded by flowers and their eyes were dazzled by the 5 colors. Coughing again, Lu Chengfeng said with a strange expression, "But, according to the imperial clan law of Great Yen Dynasty, a princess is not allowed to marry, and the prince consort can only marry into the prince consort's family." Shaking, Yu Tan bowed to Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng on the water surface. Wu Qi sheathed the sword of Greedy Wolf and returned to his seat. Although the flying sword was sheathed, Wu Qi had sneakily kept a couple dozens of explosive talismans under his sleeve, ready to unleash them at any time. Although Lu Chengfeng didn't do anything on the surface, he had secretly kept a few 9 cloud-piercing crossbows in his storage bag. Once something went wrong, he would be able to pull out the crossbows and attack the enemy immediately. The sword of Greedy Wolf let out a sword cry. Wu Qi looked at Yu Tan, who was standing less than 100 feet away from the wooden platform. Grinning coldly, he said, "Grandmaster Yu, this is a private mansion. It's late at night, and if there's nothing else, Grandmaster Yu, please turn back." Just like Yen Dan, such a beautiful girl had a very weary expression on her face. It was a weariness that came from deep within her bones, as if she had traveled tens of thousands of miles and spent a very long time as a vagabond. However, there was an inexplicable spirit that was supporting her. Although she was exhausted to the bone, and her heart was about to stop beating, she could still walk in the mortal world. A ferocious expression emerged on Lu Chengfeng's face as well. He crushed the teacup with one hand and said with a ferocious voice, "That's exactly what I want. Since Wei clan is trying to seize my foundation, they can't blame us for attacking them. If we want to have a firm foothold in Ji City and lay down a foundation that will last for thousands of years, we can't do that without money. Since Wei clan has brought themselves to our doorstep, they can't blame us for attacking them." Yu Tan walked slowly to the wooden platform. Soundlessly, she bowed at Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng, then sat down on the ground. Without saying anything, Wu Qi took out 2 new teacups and poured a cup of tea for both himself and Yu Tan. After thanking Wu Qi, Yu Tan took over the teacup and removed the bamboo hat weaved from her head, revealing a face that nearly suffocated both Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng. Wu Qi glared at Lu Chengfeng fiercely. Lu Chengfeng narrowed his eyes and grinned, revealing a strange smile. Without hesitation, he gulped down a few more bowls of fragrant tea and didn't say another word. Annoyed, Wu Qi threw the teacup far into the lake, murmuring, "Marry into my clan? I, Wu Qi, am a real man. Of course, I want a beautiful girl to be my wife. Asking me to marry into your clan? Impossible." A commotion broke out in Duke Yan Li's mansion. Wu Qi and his company had returned to the mansion. A group of servants busied themselves for some time, and only then did they serve Wu Qi and his company into the mansion. They went to take a bath and change their clothes. After messing around for a whole day, although Wu Qi and his companions had the cultivation of Xiantian realm, they were both mentally exhausted and physically exhausted. After taking a hot bath and changing into clean clothes, only then did they regain some of their energy. Quietly, Yu Tan picked up the teacup and took a sip of the fragrant tea. With a soft voice, she said, "My friends, do you want to hear a story? Yu Tan's purpose of coming here is to have a chat with Mr. Wu Qi, and then she will leave. Today, Yu Tan has offended Princess Zhonglu, so we can't stay in Great Yan Dynasty any longer. Fortunately, there are more than 100 vassal kingdoms in Great Yan Dynasty. The world is vast, and Yu Tan has other places to go." A lady whose beauty could topple a kingdom had fallen under the sword. An invincible overlord had committed suicide in front of the people. The torrential river could not bring away the grudges and love of the mortal world, and it could not bring away the love and pity of this teenage girl. The throne, the power, the endless lifespan, the boundless ambition and lofty aspiration, the man who stood high above the masses, devising strategies, deciding the life and death of the people with just a simple gesture. Yet this teenage girl could only struggle hard in the mortal world, barely maintaining her heart that still loved him. Between longevity and a beautiful woman, which one was more important? What a great temptation that was! Wu Qi felt every single cell in his body was trembling, sending forth the desire of love. Wisely, Lu Chengfeng shut his mouth. He tried to evade the topic and made up a few random questions, then shifted the topic to Wei Xiaoxiao. "Say, do you think sect leader Nye will kill Wei Xiaoxiao? That Wei clan has a great reputation. In the Lu kingdom, 70% of the armaments are managed by their merchant. I've long heard that Great Yan Dynasty has such a behemoth. If Patriarch Nye really kills Wei Xiaoxiao, I'm afraid we will be in big trouble." She raised her head up, smiled at Wu Qi and said, "Mister's answer has left Yu Tan speechless. I wonder if I can serve Mister, and share a night of pleasure with you?" While speaking, a faint blush suddenly appeared on Yu Tan's fair and clean face that looked like a jade carving. An endless temptation came rushing at Wu Qi's face, causing all the cells in his body to stiffen. The tune of the zither was faint, yet it contained a magical force that could stir one's heart and soul. Tears gushed out from Lu Chengfeng's eyes. Suddenly, he fell to the ground, falling into a deep slumber while crying. The tune of the zither had hypnotized him, breaking down all his guard and defense, and plunging him into a sweet dream that lasted for over 1,000 years. At last, when she was so tired that her heart was about to turn into ashes, all her encounters had turned into the same 3 questions. All of a sudden, Yu Tan smiled. When she smiled, it was as if all the flowers under the heaven had bloomed, and the entire backyard was lit up. Putting down the teacup, Yu Tan gently stroked the strings of the zither. Like the drizzle of a spring night, she played a melody that was faintly discernible. Accompanied by this heartbreaking melody, Yu Tan used a flat voice that sounded like boiled water to briefly narrate a person's story. After a long moment of silence, Wu Qi stared at Lu Chengfeng with a strange expression, gnashing his teeth and said, "Firstly, there is nothing between me and Princess Zhonglu. Secondly, even if there is something between us, it can only be her marrying me. Whether I want to marry her or not, it still depends on my mood. Thirdly, if you still want to use this matter to mock me, you better be a good boy and call me grandaunt. If you continue to talk about this matter, I'll marry into your family tomorrow. My good grandnephew. If there is a girl who knows you, understands you, believes in you, loves you, and spares no expense for you, who has been accompanying you since you were young, accompanying you, helping you, protecting you, giving everything she has to help you, what would you do for a girl like her? Wu Qi placed both of his hands on his knees, staring at Yu Tan quietly. Even though he had obtained the nearly monstrous intelligence of Lu Xiaobai, he still could not figure out the background of this girl, and what kind of things she had gone through. However, her statement that sounded as flat as boiled water was filled with a fatigue that made Wu Qi want to fall into a deep sleep. While both of them were discussing the strategy to deal with Wei clan, a small whirlwind suddenly rose from the lakeside. Amidst the whistling sound of the wind, a fair and beautiful figure appeared out of thin air. Wu Qi was struck with terror. He pulled out the sword of Greedy Wolf and stood in front of Lu Chengfeng, keeping his eyes fixed on the white figure. The wild wind coiled around the white figure. Step by step, she slowly glided across the surface of the lake, bringing with her a charming charm, and walked towards the wooden platform. Now that they were talking about serious matters, Wu Qi had cast away his playful attitude, frowning and beginning to think carefully. After a long while, he said word by word, "First of all, from now on, we can only address him as master. We can no longer address him as sect leader Nye. After that, tomorrow, I want Yen Bugui to make a copy of the confidential files of Scouting Office, as well as the detailed information about Wei clan." Clearing his throat, Lu Chengfeng took a sip of tea, then said coolly, "I still have some confidence in dealing with the official matters, and it is more than enough to deal with His Majesty. But the biggest problem now is that, in terms of seniority, Princess Zhang Lu is my grandaunt. If you marry into my family in the future." Drops of tears fell onto the strings of the zither. Yu Tan bowed her head, unconsciously stroking the strings with her fingers as she sighed and said, "Mister's answer is the most satisfactory answer I've ever heard in all these years. Therefore, I'll fulfill my promise and remove my veil, allowing Mister to have a look." Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. He couldn't sense any evil intention from Yu Tan. He turned his head and looked at Lu Chengfeng, who was frowning and staring at Yu Tan. Seeing Wu Qi's gaze, Lu Chengfeng nodded his head slowly, then said with a loud and clear voice, "Grandmaster Yu, your presence brings light to my humble dwelling. If you don't mind, please have a seat, Grandmaster Yu, and have a cup of tea." Yu Tan sighed lightly. She stood steadily on the surface of the water, looking at Wu Qi from afar and said softly, "Mr. Wu Qi, Duke Yen Lu, Yu Tan has no evil intention in coming here. It's just that when Yu Tan left the Imperial Palace just now, she heard the answer from Mr. Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu. She felt something in her heart, and that's why she decided to pay a visit tonight. If I have offended you in any way, I hope both of you can forgive me." She had entered the mortal world time and time again, and left it again and again. She had fallen in love, been hurt, hated, worried, bitter, and sad. Everything was for the sake of that man. The so-called trials in the mortal world had shattered the crystal-like heart of the teenage girl. But, for the sake of his smile and praise, she had struggled in the surging mortal world again and again. Chapter 105. The green light was like water, sprinkling across the heaven and earth. Under the bright moon, Yu Tan slowly rose to her feet and placed the zither on the wooden platform. Her long white cloak slid down from her body like flowing water, and was soon followed by the plain and clean long dress made of white silk, and underneath the long dress was a thin undergarment that looked like it was made of nothing. Stealthily, a slender, curvaceous, fair and flawless body that looked like a combination of jade and crystal appeared before Wu Qi's eyes. A blush emerged on Yu Tan's cheeks, and very quickly, it spread along her slender and flawless neck, all the way to her breasts, waist, and abdomen. The seductive blush was like a delicious meat that was placed in front of a wild beast, reeking of blood. If it were any other man, he would have long leaped forward like a wild tiger, ripping this tender and delicious body into pieces. Wu Qi had his eyes fixed on this naked body, and he could not find anything wrong with it. It was a body that had gathered all the beauty of a woman. His gentle gaze glided over Yu Tan's delicate eyebrows, her tall nose bridge, her watery red lips, her long neck, her towering breasts, her flat abdomen without any excess flesh, her mysterious cleavage, and her two long and slender legs that were so long that not even a piece of paper could fit into them. Suddenly Wu Qi shivered. In his spiritual ocean, the 7 holy deities and devils were roaring and roaring. Countless streams of cold air rushed out from the spiritual ocean and swept across his entire body, freezing all the cells in his body that were surging with lust. All of a sudden, Wu Qi's hazy eyes became as clear as water and as cold as frost. With a gentle smile on his face, while admiring Yu Tan's flawless and beautiful body, Wu Qi said with a soft voice, "I'm sorry, but Wu Qi is cultivating the pure yang technique. My master has told me that unless I form the Jin Dan, I can't lose my virginity." Pure yang technique? With a faint smile on her face, Yu Tan looked at Wu Qi and said softly, "This body of Yu Tan is still a pure female body, which contains the innate dark yin energy. Spending one night with Yu Tan can increase a man's cultivation by 300 years, and it can help Mr. Wu Qi form the Jin Dan. Don't tell me Mr. isn't tempted?" Wu Qi seemed to hear Lu Xiaobai's roar, "Push her down, press her down, enjoy yourself first." A strange smile appeared on Wu Qi's face. If it were Lu Xiaobai, he would have ridden on Yu Tan's back and galloped as fast as he could. Shaking his head, Wu Qi rose to his feet, picked up the clothes that Yu Tan had taken off, and gently put them on for her. While putting on the clothes for Yu Tan, Wu Qi said with a soft voice, "The biggest difference between humans and animals is that animals mate for the sake of reproduction. On the other hand, a human, at least a man like me, if he wants to have sex, he needs the foundation of love. This is the difference between humans and animals." He draped the cloak over Yu Tan's shoulders, tied the 2 straps of the cloak into a beautiful butterfly knot, then spun and walked on the water to the lakeside. He plucked a beautiful purple flower from a bunch of wisterias, then walked on the water and walked back. Wearing a smile that did not contain any evil thoughts, Wu Qi inserted the tiny, yet blooming flower into Yu Tan's hair, then hugged her and planted a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Grandmaster Yu is a sad person," Wu Qi said gently, "but no matter what, as a beautiful girl like Grandmaster Yu, you have to treat yourself better. Every beautiful girl like Grandmaster Yu is a precious product that the heaven has spent all the natural energies in this world to produce. Perhaps outsiders don't know how to protect Grandmaster Yu, so naturally, Grandmaster Yu has to take care of herself." Letting go of Yu Tan, who had her eyes widened in shock, Wu Qi rubbed his palms, smiled bitterly and said, "It's not easy for everyone to be born in this world. Try your best to live a happy life, eat what you should eat, drink what you should drink. Why do you have to put yourself in a difficult situation?" After a brief pause, Wu Qi gazed deeply into Yu Tan's panic-stricken eyes, then said with a soft voice, "Don't force yourself, don't put yourself in a difficult situation. The girl in that story is too silly. If that divine dragon really loved her, he wouldn't have hurt her like that. Whether it's a nightmare or a sweet dream, sometimes, you have to tell yourself that you will wake up from your dreams. A girl like Grandmaster Yu should have her own happiness, but it will never be me, Wu Qi, who can give you that happiness." Gently stroking Yu Tan's hair, Wu Qi said with a soft voice, "Ask your heart, then go find the one you truly love." Yu Tan stared blankly at Wu Qi. Her lips trembled as she said, 300 years of cultivation strength, you don't want it? You can form the Jin Dan in one day, don't you want it? The Jin Dan will be completed, and you will become a human immortal. You will be able to come and go as you please, and you will have at least 800 years of life. Are you sure you don't want it?" Scratching his head, Wu Qi nodded his head and said, "Yes, of course I want it. The Jin Dan will be completed, and I will have 800 years of life. Of course, I don't want it. However, as a real man, I can swindle and deceive, I can plunder the world, but if I rely on a woman to achieve my goal, that is too filthy." Although Wu Qi is a little young, Wu Qi has 2 balls between his legs. Wu Qi is a real man. Shaking his head, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, "Wu Qi's name is Wu Qi. Wu, which means don't, bik, which means beg, which means beg. The name, Wu Qi, is a constant reminder to me that even if I become a bandit, I will burn, kill, and loot, but I will never use those filthy means to achieve my goal. I can rape a girl that Wu Qi doesn't like, and use magic to gather yin energy to nourish yang energy to form the Jin Dan. But I will not accept a weak girl who is forced to come to me and use her body to help me cultivate the Jin Dan. Yu Tan was so angry that she laughed and said, Mr. Wu Qi, your words are too profound. Yu Tan doesn't understand. Wu Qi stared into Yu Tan's eyes and said coolly, You really don't understand? Then forget it. I'm not a good man, but I'm not a bitch. Yu Tan's body trembled violently. She gazed at Wu Qi, bent down and picked up the zither. After that, she walked on the water and walked to the lakeside. A whirlwind wrapped around her body. She said coldly, Mr. Wu Qi, you've let go of an opportunity that countless cultivators yearn for. Forming the Jin Dan overnight, you've let go of this opportunity. You have to know, how many brilliant geniuses have cultivated for hundreds of years, but in the end, they became nothing but a pile of dirt? Shaking his head, Wu Qi shrugged his shoulders and smiled. He raised his head and looked at the bright moon in the sky. The green moonlight sprinkled down, as if it was shining through his body. Attracted by his innate water energy, the moonlight gradually merged into his body. The essence of the moonlight came from the moon, which was also an innate water and yin energy. At this moment, Wu Qi suddenly felt that his state of mind had improved by a great margin. He felt that his moral character had been greatly sublimated. Therefore, he suddenly understood some wonderful principles. Originally, the essence of the moonlight was extremely difficult to be absorbed by people, but now, it was slowly merging into his body. A circle of hazy green light enveloped Wu Qi's body. The innate water energy was gradually compressed, condensed, and slowly merged into his meridians. Wu Qi's meridians were strengthened at an incredible speed. In just a blink of an eye, they were 3 times stronger than before he entered the state of meditation. Yu Tan didn't hear Wu Qi's voice for a long time. She turned her head and looked back in surprise. When she saw the moonlight shining on Wu Qi's body, she couldn't help but let out a deep sigh and said, You can even gain an epiphany like this. Are you a hypocrite who deceives the world, or a simple-minded fool? Or perhaps, you're just a boorish fellow who doesn't know how to flirt? A peerless beauty, a peerless opportunity, yet you don't want both of them. Do you really have great wisdom, or are you just a stupid pig? In just a blink of an eye, all the emotions vanished from Yu Tan's body, leaving only a strong fatigue that came from deep within her bones. Slowly, Yu Tan put on the bamboo hat, and covered her face with a white veil. She murmured something under her breath, but even she herself couldn't hear what she said. Quietly looking at Wu Qi, who had fallen into the state of epiphany, Yu Tan breathed out a faint sigh. Wu Qi was not even 20 years old, but he had already attained the cultivation base of meridian cultivating tier of Xiantian realm. No matter he was a hypocrite or a stupid pig with such an innate potential and talent, he was still a rare genius in the mortal world. Sighing again, Yu Tan fished out a white bag from under her sleeve, from which she took out a fist-sized green jade cube. It was an extremely cold jade cube. Right after it was taken out, a large sheet of cold air immediately spread out from it. Under the moonlight, the hazy white mist looked very obvious. Wu Qi, I don't know when we'll meet again after we part this time. No matter what, you're the first strange person I've ever met. I'll give this pill to you as a token of remembrance. When we meet again in the future, perhaps I won't be Yu Tan anymore, but will you still be the same Wu Qi? 2 lines of tears rolled down slowly from her eyes. Shaking her hand, Yu Tan threw the jade cube towards Wu Qi. It was unknown whether it was done intentionally or not, but the jade cube flew straight towards Wu Qi's face, and was about to hit his nose. Wu Qi let out a strange cry as he woke up from the state of epiphany, grabbing the pale green jade cube that was emitting a strong cold air. Suddenly, Yu Tan's body was wrapped up by a whirlwind. She gently pressed the strings of the zither a few times, breathed out a long sigh, and drifted away. What is love in this world? It teaches you to live and die for each other. 2 travelers from the south to the north, how many times does the old wing return to winter and summer? Joy is fun, parting is bitter, and there are even infatuated children. There should be a saying for a gentleman: tens of thousands of miles of layers of clouds, the evening snow of 1,000 mountains, to whom does the shadow go? The plagiarized words that Wu Qi used to fool Princess Zhang came faintly from the whirlwind. When Yu Tan's body disappeared from the high wall, a faint sigh was heard coming from afar. Mr. Wu Qi, you're a strange man with a strange way of doing things. Yu Tan has learned a lot from you. The next time we meet, can you still recognize me? Wu Qi pinched the jade cube, which emitted a cold air, and crushed it. A thumb-sized, pale golden, translucent pill drifted out from the jade cube. A fragrant aroma filled the air. Wu Qi looked at the pill, which was emitting a pale golden gleam, and suddenly gasped. In Scroll of Stealing, it was ranked first among the 9th grade immortal pills, the 3 turns fire reversing Jin Dan. Regardless of one's innate talent, intelligence, or stupidity, a spirit pill that could allow a cultivator to step straight into the realm of Jin Dan from the peak of Hotian realm had fallen into Wu Qi's hands so easily. Wu Qi stared blankly at this immortal pill, which had been described in Scroll of Stealing in a long and flowery way. He was struck dumb. With this Jin Dan of Dui, when we meet again, I will still recognize you. Without the protection of the cold jade, the medicinal strength of the Jin Dan of Dui would be completely depleted in just 15 minutes. In for a penny, in for a pound, in for a pound, Wu Qi shoved the Jin Dan into his mouth. After that, he raised his head and looked at the sky, quietly looking at the bright moon shining high up in the sky. Yu Tan, who exactly are you? Chapter 106. The sky in the east was filled with a bright red glow. Wu Qi, who felt refreshed and had water vapor hovering around his body, stretched his back and let out a few loud laughs at the few eagles hovering in the sky. A crystal blue watery light flashed in his eyes. Even the smallest feathers on the eagles' bodies were clearly seen by him. Every single detail was vivid in his mind. The Triple Revolution Jin Dan, ranked first among the 9th grade immortal pills, was indeed a real immortal pill. In just one night, without any obstruction, a thumb-sized Jin Dan had formed in each of the water meridians in Wu Qi's arms. His water chapter had officially broken through to the realm of Jin Dan, giving him a lifespan of 800 years, stepping into the ranks of human immortals. Due to the magical nature of the Scroll of Stealing, while other cultivators could only form one Jin Dan in their dantian, Wu Qi had formed one Jin Dan in each of the water meridians in his arms. Because he had used the breath-concealing technique in the Scroll of Stealing to conceal the energy ripples when he formed the Jin Dan, there was no heavenly tribulation descending from the sky, and the thunder tribulation that all cultivators feared the most was silently avoided by him. What a heaven-defying immortal pill, a heaven-defying technique. Wu Qi could feel the frightening energy flowing through the meridians in both his arms, and the wonderful feeling of having his body reborn. Once again, he threw his head back and let out a loud laugh. While laughing and laughing, Wu Qi's face suddenly twisted into a tight frown. According to the cultivation progress in the Scroll of Stealing, after forming the Jin Dan in the water chapter, his cultivation had come to an end. If he wanted to continue, he would have to find the other 4 innate spirit items, using the innate energies of gold, wood, fire, and earth to cultivate the source of gold chapter, source of wood chapter, source of fire chapter, and source of earth chapter. Only then would he be able to continue his cultivation. But how could it be so easy to find innate spirit items? The Scroll of Stealing did mention a few magical places. Every period, these places would automatically absorb the natural energies and form a few innate spirit items of 5 elements. However, the Scroll of Stealing also reminded Wu Qi that those places were extremely dangerous, and without a certain level of overall strength, he should never go there and seek his own death. Forget about the so-called natural hazards. Wu Qi's temper was that of a fugitive. He was not afraid of danger. The worst thing was he had no idea where he was right now. Where were those few magical places mentioned in Scroll of Stealing? All in all, it was impossible for them to be on this planet or this continent where Great Yan Dynasty was located, because those few magical places where the innate spirit objects of fire and earth could be formed were located in the boundless void, and not on the surface of the planet. How melancholic. Wu Qi shook his head and sighed at the sky. With the help of the Du Yi Jin Dan, he had formed the Jin Dan. Before he could find any other innate spirit objects, Wu Qi could only continue nourishing his body with water element energy stones, tempering and polishing his meridians and corporeal body. Fortunately, there was no end to this tempering process. Even if he could cultivate to a higher realm in the future, the tempering and polishing of his corporeal body would always continue. The more effort he spent, the more benefits he would get. Although he could no longer improve his cultivation base, at least the tempering of his corporeal body would never stop. While he was worrying about this, Lu Chengfeng walked out from his room with a drowsy look. He was yawning all the way, asking Wu Qi if he had a good sleep last night. Last night, with the help of the immortal pill, Wu Qi had achieved his good deed, but Lu Chengfeng was enchanted by Yutan's zither music, causing him to fall into a deep sleep. Even his memory of Yutan was wiped out, and he had no recollection of what happened last night. Wu Qi laughed and joked with Lu Chengfeng for a while, but he didn't mention anything about what happened last night. That Grandmaster Yu of Zither sect, who came in a hurry and left in a bizarre manner like a ghost of the night, had been placed in Wu Qi's heart, etching her in his memory. He had a feeling that she would definitely appear in front of him again in the future. But, just like what she said, when she appeared again, would Wu Qi still be able to recognize her? In high spirits, Yan Fu busied himself inside and outside the mansion. He ordered the servants of the Duke's mansion to bring out tens of boxes of spirit stones and all kinds of precious treasures from the mansion's storehouse, and loaded them into the carriage. Just now, Lu Chengfeng had made up his mind. There was no time like the present, and he would go to Heaven Breaking Sword sect and formally acknowledge his master today. As the Duke of Yenlu of Great Yan Dynasty, not only would Lu Chengfeng have a new backer, but Heaven Breaking Sword sect would also have a new source of income. It was worth a careful taste. Therefore, when Lu Chengfeng formally acknowledged his master, he could never be careless. Ordinary gold, silver, and jewelry were useless to Heaven Breaking Sword sect. What was useful were energy stones and various rare minerals. Therefore, most of the gifts Yan Fu prepared were upper-grade energy stones extracted from the energy stone mines in the 2 counties of Duke Yan Li's fief. He also prepared a lot of rare and precious materials for crafting items, such as 10,000 years dark iron, grand white gold essence, magma iron essence, and many others. Of course, apart from these energy stones and materials, all kinds of precious treasures and playthings were indispensable. For example, among the gifts, there were 3 boxes of green Ganoderma ointment, which was made from powder ground from 1,000 years old undersea frigid water droplets, mixed with Ganoderma, fleece flower, and some other spirit herbs that were at least 1,000 years old. This was the most expensive skincare product of Great Yan Dynasty, and it was very useful even for human immortals of Jin Dan. After consuming it, it could greatly replenish one's vitality and restore one's youthful appearance. This gift was specially prepared for Nye Yaonu, as her hair had already turned white. After consuming the green Ganoderma ointment, her white hair would definitely turn black. After all, Yan Fu was the old steward of Duke Yenlu. As such, he was able to handle all the affairs in an orderly manner, and there was no need for Wu Qi and the others to worry about it. After being busy for over 2 hours, Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng brought a fleet of 100 coaches and left Ji City, heading towards Mount White Sunday. Apart from the over 1,000 personal guards brought by Lu Chengfeng from Little Meng City, there were also 300 scouting officers led by Yan Bugui, and another 2,000 iron-armored soldiers deployed from the city defense army with the medallion of scouting officers. During the palace banquet, Yan Dan flew into a rage because of the assassination of Yan Buji, and the news had spread to all the upper echelons of Great Yan Dynasty. Now that Lu Chengfeng was going to leave the city to handle some affairs, no matter it was Yan Bugui or any other related people, no one dared to be negligent. Putting aside the 2,000 iron-armored soldiers that accompanied Lu Chengfeng, there was also a troop of 10,000 cavalrymen standing by in Ji City. Once anything happened to Lu Chengfeng, this troop of cavalrymen would immediately leave the city and rescue him. However, right after the convoy left the city gate of Ji City and traveled for less than 2 miles, Yenbugui weakly ordered a secret agent of scouting office to return to the city and deliver the message, telling the 10,000 cavalrymen who were on standby to take off their armors and rest. Lu Qingfeng would not face any danger during this trip. On the main road leading out of the city, a luxurious coach was waiting quietly in the middle of the road. A group of ferocious palace guards had blocked off the road, forcing all the merchant coaches to leave the road and take a detour through the fields on both sides of the road. There were a total of 500 fully armed palace guards, and it was an astonishing force. However, the men riding on the back of 8 golden-eyed camels were the real reason why Yenbugui ordered all the cavalrymen in the city not to wait for further orders. They were 8 demon ghosts with beautiful faces, their bodies enshrouded in a ghostly aura, and vaguely, there was a chilly wind lingering around their bodies. Different from the demon ghosts that Wu Qi had fought on the first night he arrived at Ji City, these 8 demon ghosts had the bodies of living humans. Apart from the strange aura emanating from their bodies, they looked no different from ordinary humans. Demon ghosts with bodies like this could no longer be considered as ghosts. They had formed their ghost core, and were existences that had become ghost immortals. 8 ghost immortals who had formed their ghost core, and their cultivation base was comparable to human immortals of the Jin Dan. Wu Qi did not even need to ask to know who the men in the coach were. Apart from the most favored Princess Zhang Lu of the imperial family, who had formed her Jin Dan at the young age of less than 16, who else would have such a great honor to bring 8 ghost immortals with her? On top of that, the cultivation technique of ghost immortals was the top secret inheritance of the imperial family of Great Yan Dynasty. Apart from the imperial family of Great Yan Dynasty, even someone like Chief General Jing Ke had no idea how to cultivate into a ghost immortal. With the presence of ghost immortals who had formed their ghost core, there must be some members of the strongest imperial family of Great Yan Dynasty. Which influential member of Great Yan Dynasty did not know about this rule? Suddenly, the window curtain of the coach was lifted up, and half of Princess Zhang Li's pretty face poked out from the window. Quickly, she waved at Wu Qi. Wu Qi helplessly nodded his head at Lu Qingfeng, then rode his mount and rode towards the coach. The palace guards parted to the left and right and opened up a path. Meanwhile, 8 ghost immortals were staring at Wu Qi with their ghastly eyes. 16 cold and piercing gazes made Wu Qi's skin crawl. He felt like he was walking in a graveyard in the middle of the night, and a chill ran down his spine. The pressure given to Wu Qi by any one of these 8 ghost immortals was a few times stronger than Qin Shuwen. They were definitely ghost immortals whose cultivation base was equivalent to middle stage of Jin Dan, and it was not hard to imagine the power they could unleash when they joined forces. If not because Wu Qi had successfully formed his Jin Dan with the help of the immortal pill last night, perhaps he would have fallen to the ground and lost his ability to move after being gazed at by these 8 ghost immortals. Humans and ghosts were 2 different paths, and the aura emanated from these ghost immortals was no different from a deadly poison to a living human. If not for Wu Qi having a strong cultivation base, he would have fallen to the ground and could no longer stand up. When she saw Wu Qi, Princess Zhang Li narrowed her eyes and smiled happily. "These are the 8 guards given to me by my grandpa. They are much stronger than the demon ghost you met last time. Speaking of which, that demon ghost was really useless, as it was repelled by you with just 1 palm strike. How infuriating!" From the window, Princess Zhang Li brought out a plate of steaming hot and fragrant pastries. She narrowed her eyes, smiled and said, "The last time you went to Heaven Breaking Sword Sect, you must have suffered a lot. Today, I'll accompany you there. I want to see which fool dares to find trouble with you again. Have you had your breakfast? This fragrant lotus seed cake is made from the seeds of the 5-colored fragrant lotus, which had just bloomed a few days ago. Eating a lot of it can lighten your body and replenish your energy. It's the best food for you." The 8 ghost immortals stared at Wu Qi with a stern look in their eyes, fearing that Wu Qi might do something to hurt Princess Zhang Li. Wu Qi could still bear the stares from these ghost immortals, but the subtle gossipy gazes from Lu Qingfeng, Yenbugui, and the others in the large group behind him made Wu Qi feel as if he was being pricked by needles. It was an indescribable discomfort. Looking at Princess Zhang Li's smiling face, Wu Qi took over the fragrant lotus seed cake and said with a smile, "I've had my breakfast, but I'm a little hungry now. However, I'm a little hungry now. This cake is very fragrant, thank you, princess. Grabbing a piece of cake, Wu Qi shoved it into his mouth. As expected, it was fragrant, sweet, and smooth, completely different from ordinary pastries. When Princess Zhanglu saw Wu Qi finish the cake in his mouth, her eyes narrowed into two fine lines. The five-colored divine ray flickered and flickered in the coach. Suddenly, a large number of white clouds gathered in the surrounding sky, and water droplets dripped down from the sky. The red light of the rising sun shone upon them, and a few rainbows appeared above the coach. The colorful rays were dazzling, and it was an indescribable beauty. Clapping her hands happily, Princess Zhanglu took over the empty plate of pastries from Wu Qi's hand, smiled and said, "All right, let's go to Mount White Sunday. Who were the people who made things difficult for you last time? Qin Shuwen and Shengguan Yuhong, right? I'm going to teach them a good lesson today." Two groups of people merged into one. The fierce and ferocious palace guards led the way in the front, bringing up a large cloud of dust as they charged towards Mount White Sunday. Chapter 107. When Princess Zhanglu gave the order to recall the ghost immortals, Yan Li's flying sword nearly fell to the ground and turned into a pile of scrap iron. Hastily recalling the sword beams, Yan Li was so angry that his face turned pale. He glared at Princess Zhanglu and said furiously, "Fine, fine. Zidanyi." Yan Li's lips were trembling. It looked like he wanted to say some harsh words, but he didn't have the courage to do so. He stamped his feet in exasperation, spun and transformed into a wild wind, plunging into the depths of Mount White Sunday. After breaking through layer upon layer of defensive mechanisms, the company finally arrived at the core region of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect. Nie Baihong, whose face had turned green, turned to look at Wu Qi. Wu Qi's face was also alternating between green and red, looking extremely unsightly. Both men exchanged a glance, then breathed out a heavy sigh at the same time. Nie Baihong laughed dryly and said, "I understand what Princess said. Although Wu Qi has acknowledged me as his master, I will never restrict him with the rules of the sect and the rules of seniority. Since Duke Yan Lu has joined Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect today, and he is going to learn the script of Heaven Patching Formation, which is a secret technique of our sect, I would like to invite Duke Yan Lu to pay his respects to the ancestral master." Lu Qingfeng gazed at Wu Qi with a pitying expression, then whispered into Wu Qi's ear, "If you can marry Princess Zhanglu, no one in Great Yan Dynasty will dare to offend you. Think about it carefully, I think you have a great chance." The blood-red gleam in the eyes of the few ghost immortals retracted, while the 8 sword beams retreated hastily. Greatly shocked, Yan Li had already unleashed his sword beams to fight against the ghost immortals. With just a slight collision between the few sword beams, Yan Li's golden sword beams had been suppressed and turned dimmer. Something strange happened to the ghost immortal's sword beams, as a layer of grayish-white energy had invaded them, tainting the true form of his flying sword. It made the once golden and splendid flying sword be covered with a layer of grayish-white aura, greatly weakening its power. Nie Yaonu's lips trembled for a while. At last, she laughed dryly and said, "Princess, are you here to tear down the foundation of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect?" After listening to Princess Zhangli's words, Wu Qi could only shake his head repeatedly. Princess Zhanglu, who failed to teach Qin Shuwen and Shengguan Yuhong a lesson on behalf of Wu Qi, was in a very bad mood. She twitched her lips and gazed at Nie Baihong, then said with a cold voice, "Fine, nephew Baihong, you don't have to be overly courteous. Wu Qi is my good friend. Although he is your disciple, you can't put on airs in front of him. No matter what he does in Heaven-Splitting Swordsmanship Sect, nephew Baihong, you have to be more tolerant." Wu Qi wished he could strangle Lu Qingfeng to death. Suddenly, Nie Yaonu waved her hand at him and said, "Are you Duke Yan Lu Qingfeng? You've come at the right time. The heaven-mending formation art has been vacant for so many years, it's about time for it to have a successor. However, since Duke Yan Lu is the successor of our sect, then..." The word, nephew Baihong, made Nie Baihong's face turn green, and he nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. But no matter what, he was Yan Li's son in name, and in terms of seniority, Princess Zhanglu was indeed his aunt. Therefore, There was no mistake in addressing him as nephew. This was only Jin Dan's cultivation base, yet he could already possess such a powerful divine ability. If Princess Zhongli's cultivation base was a little bit higher, wouldn't her mood change be able to affect the celestial phenomena in an area of several tens of thousands of miles? The tremendous power of this divine ability was simply unheard of. Even the legendary gods could only possess such a divine ability, right? Nie Yaonu looked at the platform, which had nearly turned into a wasteland, and put on a straight face. She breathed out a long sigh helplessly and said, "Princess, please don't ride a cloud in G-City. With the size of your cloud, how many young masters and princes of Great Yen Dynasty would be killed by this thunderbolt?" Upon hearing this, Princess Zhongli hastily cried out, "Come back!" Princess Zhongli's face blushed, and she awkwardly retracted her divine ability and dermic power. For a moment, the wind blew gently, and the clouds faded away. A couple dozens of thunderbolts once again struck down from the rapidly dispersing cloud, creating another couple dozens of large holes, each 10 feet in diameter and a few feet deep, on the platform. Only then did the dark cloud finally dissipate completely. With a five-colored gleam flickering in her eyes, Princess Zhongli stared fixedly at Yen Li, whose face had turned dark, and cried out sternly, "Third brother, are Qin Shu Wen, Shangguan Yuhong, and the others really in a secluded cultivation? For the next 30 years, don't let me see them anywhere near G-City, or else." A stream of blood shot out from the wild wind that Yen Li had transformed into. All the cultivators of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect had gathered their cultivation base in a single flying sword. When their natal flying sword was damaged, it was equal to a severe injury to their nascent divinity. Yen Li had only coughed out a mouthful of blood, and it was because of his profound cultivation base. Nie Yaonu was very satisfied with Lu Qingfeng's vow. She kept nodding her head and cheering. Then she rose to her feet, brought the company and walked around the holes on the ground, walking towards the cave where Sword Stems from the Mind was located. When they were about 100 feet away from the entrance of the cave, Nie Yaonu kept performing hand incantation gestures and unleashing one beam after another. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes, closely watching every movement of Nie Yaonu. He had memorized all the hand incantation gestures used to open the defensive formation. Although they could not use any magic to travel, Zhang Hu and Hu Wei, who were the weakest among them, had the overall strength of peak stage Hotian realm. Therefore, they could travel at a very fast speed. In just 1 hour, they had arrived at the bottom of the cliff behind the mountain. When they arrived at this place, all the guards were left at the bottom of the cliff. In high spirits, Princess Zhongli summoned a large sheet of watery clouds and strong wind. Accompanied by thunder and lightning, she brought Wu Qi, Lu Qingfeng, and Ye Baihong to the top of the cliff. Together with Yen Li, the current sect leader of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, Ye Baihong, also came out to welcome Princess Zhongli. Seeing that the ghost immortal guards serving Princess Zhongli were trying to kill Yen Li, Ye Baihong spun and left, running as far away as he could. From afar, he saw 8 grayish-white sword beams thrust towards Yen Li. His face was filled with a smile, and he couldn't conceal the gloating expression on his face. After leaving a large group of guards at the front mountain of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect and letting the disciples of Sword sect take good care of them, Wu Qi and a group of several dozens of men accompanied Lu Qingfeng to the cave abode of Sword Stems from the Mind at the back mountain. Last time, Wu Qi was brought to the main peak of the back mountain by Nie Yaonu with a magic and divine ability. But this time, as Princess Zhongli was here, who would dare to play any tricks in front of her? The group could only walk along the winding path, enjoying the beautiful scenery along the way as they rushed to the main peak. Although there was something wrong between Princess Zhongli and Yen Li, she seemed to have a very good relationship with Nie Yaonu. She stuck out her tongue and showed a rare vivacious attitude of a teenage girl. She skipped and came next to Nie Yaonu, quickly massaging her shoulders and massaging her back, soothing her breathing. Don't be angry, Sister Yaon. It's just a few broken pine trees. How many do you want? You can go to Zhonglu Park and dig them up yourself. Zidan has just formed the Jin Dan and wanted to try the ability of riding on clouds. Who knew it would turn out like this? Seeing that Yen Li was driven away by Princess Zhonglu, Nye Baihong smilingly brought a few trusted elders and disciples to greet Princess Zhonglu in a courteous manner. The hand incantation used by Nye Yaonu to break the defensive formation was recorded in the Scroll of Stealing. After witnessing Nye Yaonu's actions, Wu Qi had gained a thorough understanding of all the defensive formations in the Immortal's Cave of Sword Stems from the Mind, and there was nothing he could not understand. Lu Chengfeng and the others were struck dumb. Yen Li was the third son of Yen Qijuan, and also the third brother of Princess Zhonglu. How could she kill him just like that? Nye Yaonu, who was sitting on an ancient pine tree and regulating her breath, opened her eyes in surprise, staring blankly at Princess Zhonglu, who was standing on top of the dark cloud. Fortunately, Wu Qi had a clear mind. He grabbed Princess Zhonglu and cried out, "You can't do that! Elder Yen Li is the Grand Elder of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect. You can't kill him. It's fine if you cut off a few of his arms and legs, but you can't kill him. Princess, he is your third brother. If you kill him, no matter if it's the Crown Prince or His Majesty, you won't be able to explain it to them. These few ghost immortal guards were just given to you by His Majesty. If you take them back like this, it will not be good for you." Upon hearing what Princess Zhonglu said, Yen Li couldn't help but fly into a rage. He cried out loudly, "Zidan, this is Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect. Don't you dare act presumptuously here." Speaking of which, even Wu Qi was surprised by what kind of power Princess Zhonglu had inherited from her mother. Once the 5-colored divine rays behind her back moved, they would be able to stir up the surrounding energies of 5 elements. Along with the change of her mood, the surrounding phenomena would change accordingly. When other Jindan immortals rode on a cloud, it would be a cloud that behaved itself, but the cloud summoned by Princess Zhonglu was filled with flashing lightning and rumbling thunder, accompanied by a heavy downpour. The power was simply too frightening. Qin Shuwen and Shengguan Yuhong were both in seclusion. All the sect elders of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect who had a conflict with Wu Qi last time, except for Yen Li, who came out to greet Wu Qi with a dark face, all the other sect elders of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect were in seclusion. Princess Zhonglu, who accompanied Wu Qi to Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect in high spirits, prepared to brutally humiliate Qin Shuwen and the other sect elders to help Wu Qi vent his anger, was greatly disappointed. Her sunny mood suddenly turned dark. The 5-colored divine rays behind her back stirred into a ball of chaotic halos, and immediately, Mount White Sun was shrouded by dark clouds. The strong wind rolled the dark clouds, and the thunder was accompanied by the lightning. The dark clouds, which were dozens of acres in circumference, brought everyone up the cliff and landed on the platform in front of the Cave of Sword Stems from the Mind. When the dark clouds reached a height of several tens of feet above the platform, a few thunderclaps echoed out, followed by several dozens of lightning bolts striking down. The ancient pine trees on the platform, which had been growing for countless years, were instantly turned into ashes by the lightning bolts. Nye Yaonu seemed to want to say something, but stopped on second thought. After listening to the story of Nye Yaonu from Wu Qi, Lu Chengfeng had already understood the mystery behind it. Hastily, he took a few steps forward, bowed deeply at Nye Yaonu and said, "Chengfeng is not someone who would betray my master. Naturally, Chengfeng will obey the order given by my master. I can swear to the heaven that if my master needs my help, even if I have to sacrifice my life, I will never disobey the order given by my master." Princess Zhonglu was very angry, and the consequences would be very serious. Layers of dark clouds were hovering above Mount White Sunday. Indistinct thunderbolts kept streaking across the sky above everyone's head. Tiny electric arcs were seen rolling and rocking in the dark clouds, while a whirlwind rose from the ground, bringing with it a pungent smell of water that soared straight into the sky. All the disciples of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect had gone into hiding in various palaces, pavilions, and caves where they had their secluded cultivation. None of them dared to show their faces. 8 streams of ferocious energy soared into the sky, while the sky was filled with the endless howls of ghosts. The eyes of 8 ghost immortals standing next to Princess Zhonglu shone with an eerie red gleam. Chi-Chi took a step forward, locking Yen Li with his powerful divine will. One of the ghost immortals cried out with a gloomy voice, disrespect to the princess. Accompanied by the howl of ghosts that sounded like it came from the netherworld, 8 vague and twisted grayish-white sword beams shot out from the ghost immortals' bodies, bringing with them a large sheet of ghost flame and phosphorescence as they thrust towards Yen Li's head. It would have been better if she did not say that. Upon hearing Nye Yaonu's sentimental words, Princess Zhongli suddenly realized something and said, "Sister Yaonu is right. In the future, whoever dares to provoke me in Ji City can just go straight to his ancestral mansion and ride on a cloud. It will save me from having to deploy my army into the city to kill him, and also waste the army's pay and money." Chapter 108. Generally speaking, a Hotian cultivator could control a formation constructed from 1 to 3 array pillars, known as the 1 origin formation to 3 talents formation. A Xiantian Taoist could control 4 to 6 array pillars, known as the 4 symbols formation to 6 directions formation. And a Jin Dan realm human immortal could control 7 to 9 array pillars, known as the 7 stars formation, 8 trigrams formation, and 9 palaces formation. An earth immortal of nascent soul realm could control 10 to 12 array pillars, known as the 10 elements formation, unity formation, and origin formation. Above 12 array pillars, there were the 13 stars of the Northern and Southern Dipper, the 28 mansions, the 36 Heavenly Dipper, the 49 Dian, and the 72 Earthly Fiends. This was a formation that could only be controlled by a Heaven Immortal of nascent Dipper realm. Above Heaven Immortals were Gold Immortals, who could deploy a formation based on the 360 stars in the sky. The greater the number of array pillars, the greater the yuan qi of heaven and earth that could be gathered, and the changes of the formation would be more complicated. Therefore, the power of the formation would be greater. According to the legends, a formation constructed by a golden immortal corresponding to the 84,000 stars in the sky, using tens of thousands of array pillars and array instruments as the core, had the terrifying power to destroy a part of the void and annihilate a part of the stars. For example, Lu Chengfeng, who had just met Wu Qi, was a peak Hotian cultivator, and the formation he could control was at most 3 array pillars. The 3 talents formation was the limit that a peak Hotian cultivator could control. Now that Lu Chengfeng was a Taoist of respiration tier, the maximum number of array pillars he could control was 6. Not only did the 6 array pillars increase the gathering speed and capacity of the yuan qi of heaven and earth by 10 times, it also increased the changes and mysteries of the formation by 100 times. Because Lu Chengfeng specialized in formations, when he entered the cave abode of sword stems from the mind, he had his eyes wide open, trying to see through the mysteries of the formations inside and outside the cave abode. But even though his eyes were sore and tearing up, he could only see 2 or 3 possible locations for the erection of the formation pillars and the formation artifacts. As for the specific appearance of the formation restrictions inside and outside the cave, he could not see the slightest bit of meaning. Wu Qi, on the other hand, was able to see through the array formations and restrictions inside and outside the cave. Outside the cave were 3 major formations, the 7 stars formation, the 8 trigrams formation, and the 9 palaces formation. There were a total of 24 array cores. The array pillars and the array guarding artifact were all lower-grade magic treasures, possessing a very strong defensive power. Furthermore, the formation mainly focused on illusion attacks and mazes. After entering the entrance of the cave, a Heavenly Dipper and Earthly Fiend Great Formation with 108 formation cores was set up in the 360m-long passageway. Only Heaven Immortals with phenomenal success in their nascent divinity could set up this formation, and only they would have enough energy to activate it. Among the 108 formation cores, 12 of them were actually emitting fluctuations of spiritual energy unique to mid-grade magic treasures. This great formation of heavenly spirits and earthly evils was in accordance with the 4 symbols. It connected the heavenly stars above and the earthly chi below. It covered the entire main peak of Mount White Sunday. It was a formation that focused on defense and assisted with killing. According to Wu Qi's estimation, if someone with sufficient overall strength were to control it, this formation could withstand the attack of a Heaven Immortal and could easily kill an Earth Immortal of peak stage nascent soul realm. However, what made Wu Qi glad was that there was no one controlling this formation. It seemed like Nye Yaonu had only obtained the method to pass through this formation, but did not obtain the essence of controlling it. Therefore, this powerful formation was just a dead formation mentioned in the scroll of stealing. A dead formation was a formation that could be passed through as long as one knew the method to pass through it with his eyes closed. With Wu Qi's current cultivation base of early-stage Jin Dan realm, he could easily pass through this kind of dead formation by doing a somersault after getting drunk. Wu Qi could not help but shake his head. The immortal who left behind the legacy of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect was a very strange person. He had constructed such a powerful formation, but he did not leave behind all the methods to control it, and only left behind a dead formation. Apart from a cultivator like Wu Qi who had inherited the scroll of stealing and was an expert in the art of formations, as long as he did not have an extremely bad luck, this formation would not stop any ordinary early-stage nascent soul earth immortal from passing through it. Unless that immortal was sure that no one above nascent soul realm could discover this place, there was no reason for him to leave behind a dead formation. Strange, this was really strange. This formation gave Wu Qi a very strange feeling. Even if that immortal had left behind his legacy, this formation could still be activated with its full power, as long as he left behind a door for his successor who met the requirements to enter and exit it. There was no need for him to leave behind a dead formation, was there? Following closely behind Nye Yaonu, Wu Qi observed the method she used to open the formation. His eyes were darting from side to side, and he could clearly see the positions of all 108 formation cores in the formation. Currently, he only had the Sword of Greedy Wolf, which was a lower-grade magical treasure. However, there were 96 lower-grade magical treasures and 12 middle-grade magical treasures in this formation. It made his heart itch. As a member of the Underhand sect, Wu Qi's professional habit had kicked in. He wished he could strike right now and obtain everything in this dead formation. The 3,060 feet tunnel was not a long one. Very soon, they walked out of the formation and arrived at a strange space in the belly of the mountain. It was a magnificent immortal's cave, measuring over 500 acres in circumference. There was a small bridge over a flowing stream, a garden with herbs growing in it, and the surrounding walls were made of mountain rocks that looked as white as jade. Pure white light shone out from the rocks and walls, illuminating the entire place as bright as day. A breeze came blowing from the front. Right at the exit of the tunnel was a small river. The riverside was filled with weeping willows. Their long branches were swaying gently in the breeze, and a faint fragrance of flowers was wafting out from them. Lu Chengfeng was struck dumb. When had he ever seen a blessed land of immortals like this? It was a completely sealed mountain, and yet, there was a strange little world of its own. Such a method had gone beyond his imagination. On top of that, the natural energy here was at least 30 times denser than the outside world. The natural energy here had condensed into white clouds that could be seen with naked eyes. What flew above their heads and intertwined with their feet were all very dense natural energy. Even the water flowing in the small river had turned into a sticky liquid that looked like wine paste after being soaked by the extremely dense natural energy. If brought to the outside world, a river like this could be directly consumed as a panacea, which could cure almost all diseases. And here, there was a river that measured about 2 miles long and 30 feet wide, and was filled with the same kind of water. Wu Qi pretended to be in a daze, staring fixedly at the unbelievable scene before him. There was a detailed description of such a scene in Scroll of Stealing. There were 36 tiers of heaven immortals, and any heaven immortal of the standard tier, even the weakest heaven immortal of the 36th tier, had the ability to exercise a divine ability that allowed them to construct a small world with a perfect natural environment in a narrow space like the belly of a mountain or underground. This was an ability that any heaven immortal could possess. A small world with the circumference of 500 acres could at most be constructed by a heaven immortal of the 36th tier, and it could not be considered as a formidable figure. If it were a small world constructed by a first-tier heaven immortal, it would have the size of a continent. That would be a real minor kiliacosm, and it could not be compared with this tiny cave abode. As for the 18th tier gold immortal, the cave abode constructed by them would be no different than a planet. However, as a Taoist of Xiantian realm, Wu Qi had to act like a daze, or at least, he had to look the same as Lu Chengfeng. Otherwise, it would be too suspicious. Nie Yaonu gazed at Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng, who were in a daze, and a contented smile emerged on her face. Senior, the magical power and divine ability of Master Immortal are far beyond the imagination of us juniors. This is the core area of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect. Apart from me, only Baihong, Zidan, and a few of my trusted disciples have come here before. Come, you will have plenty of chances to come here and cultivate in the future. Now, follow me and pay your respects to the ancestral master. Wu Qi shuddered and woke up from his dazed state. He pulled Lu Chengfeng forcefully. Only then did Lu Chengfeng take a deep breath and praise in a low voice. The blessed land of immortals is indeed extraordinary. Although the main peak of Mount White Goat does not look very wide, I can't believe there is such a vast world in the belly of the mountain. It is indeed the means of immortals, which is not something we mortals can imagine. With a complacent smile on her face, Nie Yaonu brought Wu Qi and the company through the willow forest, crossed the river through a small bridge carved out of white jade, went past a few flowerbeds and herb gardens, and finally came to the front of an ancient-looking pavilion located right in the middle of the cave. The pavilion was 3 stories tall, and a horizontal board was hung on top of it. 4 large characters of Peerless Sword formation were carved neatly on it. A few young men and women were seen working in front of the pavilion, carefully wiping the stairs and railings with white cloths. When they saw Nie Yaonu and her company coming in, they bowed and greeted her from a distance. But they did not come close to her, and just continued with their work wholeheartedly. Wu Qi gave these few young men and women a glance. With his eyesight, he could tell that 4 of them had the cultivation base of Jin Dan realm. According to Haoying Fengying, there were 36 Jin Dan realm elders in the Elder Council of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, and 27 of them were leaning towards Yanli. Therefore, Yanli had the real power in Heaven-Breaking Sword sect. However, judging from the cultivation base of these few young men and women, there were 4 Jin Dan realm elders here, and there were also several dozens of exquisite pavilions and houses in the cave. Vaguely, ripples of energy could be sensed coming out from these pavilions and houses. Obviously, someone was having a secluded cultivation in there. From this, it could be seen that Nie Yaonu had an enormous hidden power, which was not something that Haoying Fengying and his company could guess. Whether or not Yanli really had the real power in Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, this was a question that needed to be carefully considered. It was not the actual strength that was exposed, but the power that was hidden in the dark like Nie Yaonu. With the natural energy in the cave, which was 30 times denser than the outside world, it was actually not a difficult task to cultivate a group of Jin Dan realm cultivators. Wu Qi turned his head and gave Princess Zhanglu a look. Since Nie Yaonu could allow Princess Zhanglu to come into this cave, it seemed like both of them had a pretty good relationship. Nie Yaonu washed her hands in a basin carved out of jade and tidied up her appearance. With a solemn expression, she led the group into the pavilion. Upon entering the pavilion, Wu Qi immediately saw an altar placed at the far end of the pavilion. On top of it were incense burners, candlesticks, and some other utensils. A portrait of an immortal with a blurred face was hung neatly on the wall. The immortal was riding on a strange-looking flood dragon, holding a sword in his left hand and an 8 trigrams formation in his right hand. Obviously, he was an immortal who cultivated in both sword and formation techniques. Apparently, the words Peerless Sword formation on the outside of the pavilion had its origin. With a solemn expression, Nie Yaonu pointed at the portrait and said, "This is the ancestral master of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, Immortal Zhen. Chengfeng Wu Qi, follow me and pay your respects to him." Wu Qi nodded his head, then followed Nie Yaonu and walked towards the altar. After taking a few steps forward, Wu Qi's body suddenly trembled. Instinctively, he turned his head to look at the ceiling of the pavilion. A 6-edged palace lantern was hung on the ceiling of this pavilion. The flame inside the lantern was dazzling, and the faint green light shone brightly on the entire floor of the pavilion. However, Wu Qi could clearly sense the aura of earth, wood, and fire, 3 innate spirit items, coming out from this palace lantern. Wu Qi needed to find the innate spirit items of the other 4 quadrants before he could continue his cultivation, and there were 3 of them in this palace lantern. Wu Qi's eyes darted back and forth. He was so touched that he nearly shed tears. Chapter 109. Everyone in the pavilion was laughing. Both Nye Yaonu and Nye Baihong breathed out a long sigh of relief and laughed. Lu Qingfeng had a relaxed and hopeful smile on his face, while Princess Zhonglu had a silly and blurry smile, and no one knew what she was laughing at. Wu Qi could clearly see a gleam of wild joy flashing in the eyes of Nye Yaonu and Nye Baihong. Princess Zhonglu nodded her head and said, "Of course. Sister Yaonu has taken in a disciple and is mining a few energy stone veins in her disciple's territory. Who dares to say anything against that? All the other immortal sects of Great Yan Dynasty are secretly mining energy stone veins in their own territories, and none of them dares to say anything against that. It's just that Sister Yaonu is too dutiful, and that's why she didn't do that. In fact, Sister Yaonu should have done that long ago." She breathed out a satisfied sigh, frowned and said, "But these energy stone veins are under the control of Great Yan Dynasty. If I send someone to mine them, I'm afraid the imperial court will have a hard time explaining it to them." Princess Zhongli's words were naive and innocent, and it made Wu Qi and the others smile bitterly. The difference between an innate spirit item and an acquired treasure was that an innate spirit item contained a thread of innate energy. The biggest effect of the so-called innate energy was that once a cultivator spent a long time with it, especially after he had transformed it into a magical treasure and refined it into his own body, it could slowly transform the cultivator's physique, transforming his mortal body into an innate body. The so-called divine flame of order was actually a wisp of aura of heaven and earth's law hidden in this inconspicuous purple and green flame, which formed a natural law of the heaven and earth. Just like the deterrent force that the government officials in the mortal world could give to local ruffians, the divine flame of order had a very strong restraining force on all evil spirits under the heaven and earth. Enveloped by the divine flame of order, all Yin devils and heavenly devils, both tangible and intangible, would not dare to come close to it. If a cultivator could cultivate in it, no external devils would dare to invade his or her body. Together with the magical effect of the soul awakening wood, the cultivator would be able to keep both internal and external devils at bay, and the cultivator would be able to cultivate in peace. She stroked the turtle shell with mixed emotions, then said with a deep voice, "Not only does this turtle shell contain all the techniques of the art of heaven patching formation, it is also a rare defensive magical treasure. Defensive-type magic treasures are 100 times rarer than offensive magic treasures. Since you cultivate the Tao of formations, I don't have a flying sword to bestow upon you. If you refine it, you will have the capital to defend yourself." For example, if Nye Yaonu kept the stone of separation with her for a long period of time, her body would gradually transform into an innate body of earth element. By then, she would not need to cultivate any earth elemental magic or cultivation technique, and she would be able to freely breathe in the earth elemental energy. Like an innate divine ability, she would be able to unleash all kinds of earth elemental magic and divine abilities. However, if a Hotian cultivator wanted to cast all kinds of earth attribute magic arts, he would have to chant incantations, make hand seals, and painstakingly temper his body and magic power. This would be extremely difficult. Among all the people here, only Wu Qi had the strangest smile on his face. No matter how he looked at it, he looked like a sneaky smile of a rat that was about to steal oil. While laughing happily, he kept sneaking sneaky glances at the dustless lamp, revealing his 2 rows of teeth, which looked very eye-catching under the dim greenish light. In short, now that Lu Qingfeng had joined Heaven Breaking Sword sect, it was a good thing for everyone. There was nothing more suitable than this. "Oh!" Wu Qi exclaimed with great surprise, then he kept looking at the dustless lamp with an envious and surprised expression. 2 beams of blue gleam flashed from the depth of his eyes, as he had memorized the entire image of the dustless lamp in his mind. The 6 pillars of this dustless lamp were carved from an innate stone of separation, which contained innate earth energy essence, making it heavy and stable. Therefore, no dust could get close to it. Putting aside the innate stone of separation and innate soul awakening wood, Wuqi only needed to extract a thread of innate energy from them, and he would be able to start cultivating the source of earth chapter and source of wood chapter. As for this thread of divine flame of order, not only did Wuqi want to obtain a thread of innate fire energy from it, he also had the intention to subdue it for his own use. The power of this flame was immense, and it had countless magical effects. In the future, no matter it was crafting items, formations, concocting pills, or some other things, this innate divine flame would be very useful. With utmost respect, Lu Chengfeng kowtowed a few times to Nie Yaonu, then took over the turtle shell with both hands. With a serious tone, he said, "I'm ashamed to accept it. The knowledge of formations is my biggest hobby. I'll definitely carry the arts of heaven-patching formation to a greater height, bringing glory to heaven-breaking sword sect." After a brief pause, Lu Chengfeng smiled and said, "In addition, there are a few energy stone veins in my territory. They have a huge amount of reserves, and their quality is excellent. Since I'm a disciple of heaven-breaking sword sect, naturally, these energy stone veins will be incorporated into the sect's property. I hope Grand Elder can quickly send someone to take over the management of the mine and take charge of the mining." Recalling the description of innate spirit items found in Scroll of Stealing, Wuqi felt a burning flame burning in his heart. Above the seat of the lamp was a thumb-thick, 1 foot and 2 inches tall flame of purple and green. It was the divine flame of order, a flame that had gathered the essence of the sun and moon, as well as the essence of all the stars in the universe, and was smelted by the tremendous power of the heaven and earth. Among the 3 innate spirit items found in the dustless lamp, this divine flame of order had the highest quality, and its power was also the greatest. Among all the flames in the universe, it could be ranked in the top 5. But now, as Lu Chengfeng had given them a few energy stone veins, the mother and son could finally go all out and work hard. Soon, those disciples who were close to them would have a great amount of energy stones to help them in their cultivation, and the progress of their cultivation would take a huge leap. Within 3 days, I must get my hands on the dustless lamp. Wuqi made up his mind. This was the difference between an innate spirit item and an acquired precious treasure. No matter how powerful an acquired precious treasure was, it did not have the miraculous effect of changing one's innate talent like an innate spirit item. On the other hand, the innate talent was the foundation of a cultivator. For a cultivator who possessed an innate body, it would take him at least 1,000 years to become a gold immortal. On the other hand, for an ordinary acquired cultivator, it would take him 2,000 to 3,000 years of hard work to become a heaven immortal, the weakest of 36th tier. Only someone like Lu Chengfeng, who had no foundation in Great Yan Dynasty and did not have too many conflicts of interest, would be willing to collude with Nie Yaonu and her son. Using energy stone veins to exchange for Nie Yaonu and her son, who possessed a formidable overall strength, was something that Lu Chengfeng had no choice but to do if he wanted to have a foothold in Great Yan Imperial Court. Without a strong backing to deter others, incidents such as Taba Qingye's assassination and Qin Qingshui's framing would happen more and more in the future. In the middle of these 6 pillars was a pagoda-shaped flame seat, which was carved from an innate soul-awakening wood, the size of an infant's head. For heaven immortals and even gold immortals, the innate soul-awakening wood was an extremely rare treasure. It was not only because it contained a thread of innate wood energy, but more importantly, it had a unique divine power that could calm one's mind and stabilize one's aura. With an innate soul awakening wood supporting one would not have any inner demons aroused during one's cultivation and would not have any distracting thoughts. The balance of one's aura would never have any deviation. Therefore, the progress of one's cultivation would be tremendous. Nie Yaonu noticed the surprised look in Wu Qi's eyes. She too raised her head and looked at the lamp, smiled complacently and said, "This is the dustless lamp, an extraordinary treasure left behind by our ancestral immortal. Within the light, there will be no dirt or dust, and no poisonous insects will be able to enter. When exercising and meditating under the light, no outer demons will be able to invade your body. The reason why I can have my current cultivation base is because of the great power of this treasure. Nye Yaonu took a deep breath, took over the turtle shell with an extremely solemn expression, then spun and looked at Lu Chengfeng. Lu Chengfeng dared not to show any neglect. Hastily, he lifted his long robe and knelt down respectfully before Nye Yaonu. Nye Yaonu nodded her head satisfyingly. Holding the turtle shell with both hands, she said with a solemn expression, "Chengfeng, this is one of the two unique sword formations of our sect, the arts of heaven patching formation. With my innate talent, I can only inherit the sword technique passed down by our ancestral immortal. As for this arts of heaven patching formation, I will have to rely on you to carry it forward." After worshipping immortal Zhen Yi with a solemn expression, Nye Yaonu once again knelt down and kowtowed 9 times before the huge portrait. After that, she murmured a prayer under her breath and cast a beam of light onto the portrait. On the portrait, the 8 trigrams formation held by Cactus Zhen Yi suddenly flashed with a hazy gleam. Then, a turtle shell, about the size of a human head, sparkling and translucent like jade, glinting with a tricolored gleam, slowly flew out from the portrait. This was the biggest gain from taking Lu Chengfeng as their disciple. The innate talent of Nye Yaonu and Nye Baihong had determined that they were better at controlling flying swords to kill people. As for the Tao of formation, which required years of painstaking study, it was not their cup of tea. On the other hand, there was no disciple in heaven-breaking sword sect who could let them feel at ease to inherit the Tao of formation. Using the arts of heaven-patching formation, which was of little value, to exchange for a few energy stone veins with an enormous reserve and high quality, this was a very profitable deal for both mother and son. Currently, Heaven-Breaking Sword sect had to rely on the amount of energy stones allocated by the imperial clan of Great Yen Dynasty every year for their supply of energy stones. It was conceivable that as the 3rd son of the crown prince of Great Yen Dynasty, Yanli, he must have taken control of the distribution of energy stones. As a result, the close disciples and trusted disciples of Nye Yaonu and Nye Baihong could only rely on Yanli to get a few pieces of energy stones to support their cultivation. The Cave of Sword Stems from the Mind was an important place in Heaven-Breaking Sword sect. If they were not the true loyal disciples, how would Nye Yaonu dare to bring them here? Therefore, the lack of energy stones had become the biggest bottleneck that limited the development of Nye Yaonu and Nye Baihong's trusted disciples. When Niao Xiang kowtowed and bowed to immortal Zhen Yi, officially performing the ceremony of joining the sect, Wu Qi couldn't help but sneer in his mind. Since that was the case, he would accept the benefits of this dustless lamp on behalf of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect. After carefully planning, he would never leave this dustless lamp to Heaven-Breaking Sword sect. Immediately, Wu Qi burst out into a loud laughter and said, "What are you talking about, Grand Elder? This is the mineral vein in our young master's territory. How he wants to mine it, and who he wants to give it to, isn't it just a matter of a word? Even if the energy stone mine is under the control of Great Yen Dynasty, it is, after all, supplied to Heaven-Breaking Sword sect. So, this is not a taboo. Even if someone wants to make a fuss, hee, Zhang Lu, what do you think about this?" It was a pity that Nye Yaonu was sitting on a mountain of treasure, but she didn't know how to appreciate it. Was she really just going to use this dustless lamp to help her with her cultivation? Especially when Jin Dan attained the Mahayana realm in the future, and was about to form his nascent soul, there would be a tribulation from the outer heavens. If he had a thread of divine flame of order in his body, it would be a joke if any devil dared to invade him. Once the divine flame of order was unleashed, it would be able to refine the invisible devil into the purest soul energy particles, allowing Wu Qi to absorb them and strengthen his soul. Therefore, he would never let go of this divine flame of order. Slowly, Wu Qi, Nye Baihong, and Princess Zhang Lu retreated to a side, watching quietly. If not for Lu Chengfeng, Duke Yen Lu, who suddenly appeared out of nowhere, Nye Yaonu and her son would really like to recruit some members of the imperial clan as their disciples. But how could anyone really have the courage to be their disciple? With Yen Li in Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, many descendants of the nobles and ministers of Great Yen Dynasty had naturally become his disciples. Who would have the courage to give even a piece of energy stone to Nye Yaonu and her son? Chapter 110. Ji City was divided into 17 districts from the inside to the outside. Naturally, the core of the district was the Palace City, where the Imperial Palace was located. Outside the Palace City, from Inner 1 to Inner 6, the people who lived in these 6 districts were the nobles and important ministers of Great Yen Dynasty. Outside the 6 inner cities, from Middle 1 to Middle 6, the people who lived in these 6 districts were the wealthy merchants and influential clans. Outside the 6 middle cities, the people who lived in all the outer cities were the common people and ordinary merchants. It was the largest market of 4 seas, that brought together countless rare and precious products from Great Yen Dynasty and over 100 vassal kingdoms. It was located in the eastern part of Middle 1, occupying a total of 50 blocks and tens of thousands of shops of various sizes. It was located close to the inner city, which made it convenient for the nobles and princes to go out and purchase all kinds of rare and precious items. At the same time, it was also convenient for the merchants in the 6 middle cities to take care of their business. On top of that, because it was located deep within Ji City, it was very safe, as no one dared to cause trouble here. After Lu Chengfeng had inherited the script of heaven patching formation and had a feast of spirit fruits and fine wine produced in the Immortal's Cave of Sword Stems from the Mind in Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, the company returned to Ji City. It was almost evening. Lu Chengfeng brought his men and went straight to Duke Yen Li's mansion, while Wu Qi brought Meng Xiaobai and a few burly men from Meng Village and went straight to the Market of 4 Seas, planning to buy some useful things. As Princess Zhang Li had just formed her Jin Dan, before her Jin Dan was stabilized, she could bring her guards and wander around during the day. But when night fell, she would have to cultivate her Jin Dan and stabilize her cultivation. Therefore, although she was reluctant to part with Wu Qi, she could only pout her lips and return to the palace city with the group of guards. The Market of 4 Seas was the only market in Ji City that did not have a curfew at night. Regardless of day or night, this place was always crowded with people, and all kinds of trades of various sizes were taking place all the time. It was reasonable. Many of the products in the Market of 4 Seas were priceless treasures that were worth tens of thousands of gold coins. Sometimes, trading at night would bring enough privacy to both parties. With the token of 7 swallows given to him by Princess Zhanglu, Wu Qi was not worried about entering the city later. Even if the city gates of the inner city were closed at night, as long as he flashed the token of 7 swallows, he would be able to enter the inner city. Therefore, he brought Meng Xiaobai and the others to the Market of 4 Seas to trade. The streets of the Market of 4 Seas were spacious and clean. The streets were paved with stones and were about 100 feet wide. Endless streams of people and carriages could be seen everywhere. The architectural style of Market of 4 Seas was much bolder and novel compared to the other districts in Ji City. With just a glance, one could see tall and luxurious buildings with 7, 8, and even more than 10 stories. Merchant buildings that were built with all kinds of precious wood and rare stone materials could be found everywhere. Some of the larger merchant groups even had a large number of beautiful jade and precious stones inlaid on the buildings, which were especially dazzling under the sunlight. Right after Wu Qi brought Meng Xiaobai and the others into the Market of 4 Seas, a few figures dashed out from a 3-storied wooden building at the crossroad. A middle-aged man dressed in a green outfit was the quickest. He rushed to Wu Qi's side, bowed and said, "Young master, is this your first time coming to the Market of 4 Seas? Do you need to purchase any rare marine products or rare treasures from the mountains? It's not that I, Hai Yunten, want to boast, but there are over 57,000 shops and merchant groups in this Market of 4 Seas, and I'm familiar with every single one of them." The few figures who dashed out from behind Hai Yuntian saw that he had started a conversation with Wu Qi. They immediately smiled and shook their heads, then returned to the wooden building. Wu Qi gave Hai Yuntian a look, who was clad in a green outfit and had a black token hanging on his waist. He nodded his head and said, "Are you the official broker of Market of 4 Seas?" Hai Yuntian kept nodding his head. He took out the black wooden medallion hanging on his waist and showed it to Wu Qi, pointing at the symbol of 5 dark green eyes on the wooden medallion complacently. He smiled and said, "Young master, I'm the rare 5 eyes broker in the Market of 4 Seas." "Young master, You have to know that we, the official brokers, have different levels as well. With each level, we'll have one more eye engraved on our identity token. 7 eyes is the highest level, but only the managers of those top-grade merchant groups, Old Chow Feng, can have that level. For people like us, who specialize in guiding customers and making deals, 5 eyes is already the highest level. Wu Qi nodded his head and said disapprovingly, I don't care how many eyes you are, as long as you can help me find the things I need. Soul-breaking, dust barrier, 1,000-year purple gold-striped spider silk, deep-sea merman oil. Wu Qi listed out dozens of rare materials in a row, then turned to Hai Yuntian and said, Can you find all these things? If not, you have to have at least the first 4. Hai Yuntian's lips moved slightly, while his fingers kept moving. After the span of a few breaths, his eyes brightened, then he bowed and said, Young master, you've asked the right person. Soul-breaking is a special wood that can kill all kinds of bugs. Dust barrier is a magical grass that can stabilize one's mind. Purple gold-striped spider silk is the best material for making all kinds of soft armors, and merman oil is used to make sacrificial lamps that can last for tens of thousands of years in tombs. After giving out a long list of information, Hai Yuntian smiled and said, Except for the last few things, I've never heard of them before. Young master, don't worry about the others, I can find them in the market of 4 seas. Wu Qi was delighted. If he could find less than half of these things, or even just the first 4 materials, he would be able to make a new spirit lamp and take away all the pre-world spirit items contained in it. He didn't expect that he could find more than 90% of the required materials in the market of 4 seas. This was indeed a pleasant surprise. Good, very good. With this, Wu Qi was fully confident that even if he took away the 3 pre-world spirit items contained in the dustless lamp, no one would notice anything wrong. The dustless lamp would still be the dustless lamp. Nodding approvingly, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, Lead the way now. Get me as many as you can find. Hai Yuntian responded hurriedly, then led Wu Qi and walked forward along the street. Not long after that, he led Wu Qi to a tea house that was exquisitely decorated, but not luxurious. He asked Wu Qi to reserve a private room in the tea house, then hurriedly trotted out of the tea house. For example, these strange creatures that Wu Qi wanted to buy, if one were to talk about their practical use, ordinary people wouldn't be able to use them. Generally speaking, only those young masters of rich and powerful families who like to hunt for novelty would like to make these things to show off in front of others. Therefore, the value of these things was extremely high. Wu Qi wanted to buy dozens of these rare and precious things in one go, which were rarely seen by ordinary people. Adding up the price of all these things, it would be an enormous figure that would make one speechless. This was a genuine and important customer. Since he was an important customer, he naturally couldn't let Wu Qi run from shop to shop to shop to purchase these things. As a qualified official broker, Hai Yuntian would inform the shopkeepers of the relevant shops, and have them deliver all kinds of goods to Wu Qi. Wu Qi was very clear that this was also the way of survival for an official broker like Hai Yuntian. Some rare and precious items wouldn't only be available in a single shop, it was very likely that tens or hundreds of shops would have them. Hai Yuntian would inform a shop to deliver the goods, and this would be his favor. So, he would naturally take a share of the profits afterward. However, without such an official broker, if Wu Qi had to visit several tens of thousands of shops by himself, how long would it take him to gather all the materials he needed? How could it be like now, sitting in a tea house and drinking tea, and before long, someone would deliver the goods to his door? Not long after that, Hai Yuntian, with his forehead covered in sweat, led 3 shopkeepers into the private room of the tea house. These shopkeepers had simple and honest faces, but a bright gleam could be seen flickering in their eyes from time to time. They bowed and bowed to Wu Qi with a smile on their face. All 3 shopkeepers reached out their hands and swiped on their fingers. Amidst a bright gleam, several dozens of jade boxes and wooden boxes of different sizes appeared on the floor of the private room. These shopkeepers actually owned storage rings, which were extremely rare magical items. Wu Qi couldn't help but have his lips twitch. This was how a big merchant of G City should behave. Hai Yuntian bent his waist and carefully opened up the wooden boxes, revealing all kinds of goods inside. A blue gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes. He threw away the teacup, carefully walked to the front of these goods and gave them a thorough examination. They were all rare and precious materials according to the amount he asked for, and the quality of the goods was much higher than what he asked for. For example, the quality of the purple gold spider silk was produced by a purple gold spider that was at least 1,500 years old. The oil of the deep-sea merman was sticky like a paste and had a pleasant aroma. It was not only the oil of the merman, but also the oil extracted from the body of a demon among the mermen who had achieved some achievements in cultivation. Very good, Wu Qi praised. He gave the three shopkeepers a glance, who had a complacent expression on their faces, smiled and asked, "If I may ask, do you want to pay with gold and silver, or what?" One of the shopkeepers nodded his head and smiled. "Young master, you can pay with gold and silver, or energy stones. Spirit pills, magical items, and anything else, there is nothing we won't accept." After a brief moment of silence, the shopkeeper glanced at all the goods on the floor and gave out a price. If they were to pay with gold and silver, the total value of these dozens of goods would be 500 gold coins. If they were to pay with energy stones, it would cost 500 upper-grade energy stones. After pondering for a while, Wu Qi took out a huge amount of gold, silver, and jewelry from his storage ring. These were all the private wealth that the former mayor of Little Meng City, Yi Yan, and his brothers had obtained by plundering the land. Now, they had all become Wu Qi's personal property. Gold and silver jewelry didn't have much value to a cultivator, so Wu Qi didn't want to use the upper-grade water element energy stones given by Princess Zhonglu to pay for them. A big pile of gold, silver, and jewels was piled up. With their sharp eyes, the three managers could tell with just one glance that Wu Qi would only give them more valuables, not less. Immediately, they thanked Wu Qi and put away all the money. Wu Qi waved his hand and stored all the goods into his storage ring. The three shopkeepers bid their farewells and left the tea house in a hurry. After that, Wu Qi gave Hai Yuntian a generous tip and left his contact information. After that, he brought Meng Xiaobai and the others and left the tea house. Hai Yuntian still followed beside him attentively, sending Wu Qi off from the market of 4 seas. He promised that if Wu Qi ever needed any rare and precious items in the future, he could just come to the market of 4 seas and look for him, and he would definitely get it done properly for Wu Qi. Just from today's transaction, from the total value of 500,000 gold coins, Hai Yuntian could get a commission of 5,000 gold coins. In any vassal kingdom of Great Yan Dynasty, this was the entire wealth of a small noble clan. Since Hai Yuntian had gotten such a huge commission out of nowhere, how could he not take good care of his customers? While chatting with Hai Yuntian, Wu Qi was enjoying the scenery of the market of 4 seas. When they were strolling on the street, Wu Qi suddenly heard a loud noise coming from a restaurant on the side of the road, and a man singing with a loud and desolate voice, "The wind is blowing, the water is cold, the warrior will never return." Upon hearing the singing, Wu Qi was startled, quickly turning his head and looking towards the direction of the restaurant. A burly man happened to stretch half of his body out from the window on the 3rd floor of the restaurant, grabbing a wine jar and throwing it towards Wu Qi's head. The man pointed his finger at Wu Qi and shouted, "Hey, kid, I know you. Come up here, have a drink with Lao Tzu." The wine jar brushed past Wu Qi's nose and fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. Wu Qi gave the burly man a glance, rolled his eyes, and walked back into the restaurant grumpily. Chapter 111. At the 4 corners of the lobby, a few muscular men were standing there, glaring at Wu Qi like a tiger watching its prey. When Wu Qi walked into the lobby, these men immediately glared at him fiercely, their eyes never leaving his body. Although these men looked inconspicuous at first glance, each of them was an expert of body-strengthening tier of Xiantian realm. Their gazes were as sharp as blades, and if an ordinary merchant were to be stared at by them, they might suffer an internal injury. No wonder there was not a single customer in this lobby. Wu Qi had gulped down 4 jars of strong wine. The acquired energies of 5 elements cultivated with the qi circulating technique of 5 elements were circulating rapidly in his meridians, transforming the powerful medicinal strength contained in the wine into surging innate energies. He looked at Yen Dan, laughed out loud and said, "This is the Tower of Heroes, not the Tower of Black Bears. Hee, when a hero meets the emperor, should he kneel down and greet him? If that is the case, I don't need to come to this Tower of Heroes. Wu Qi can just go to the imperial palace and kowtow to the emperor." Wu Qi threw a glance at the group of people, who were enjoying themselves. Without saying a word, he walked to the fireplace and sat right next to Gao Jianli, who was singing at the top of his lungs. He picked up a wine jar and gave a toast to Yen Dan from a distance. After that, he raised the wine jar up and gulped down at least 15 liters of strong wine. Using his innate water energy, he quickly wrapped up the wine and dissolved the alcohol. Wu Qi burped and sprayed out a mouthful of alcohol. Suddenly, his eyes became extremely bright. After giving Wu Qi a glance, Yen Dan said with a deep voice, "Since the founding of Great Yen Dynasty over 2,000 years ago, countless members of imperial clan have died. But my son, Buji, is the first clan leader of Great Yen Dynasty and the first Duke of Great Yen Dynasty to be assassinated. This case will be investigated by Gao Jianli and Chief General Jing Ku, and you will be responsible for assisting them. Find out who is the one who dares to assassinate Yen Buji." Leading a group of burly men, Qin Weong, the founder of Qin clan of Great Yen Dynasty, was standing next to the 2-feet-tall platform. Qin Weong, who had a handsome face and a tall and valiant stature, seemed to be in his 30s, was carrying a wine jar in his hand. While cheering for Jing Ku, he was drinking to his heart's content. It was unknown whether it was because of the alcohol or some other reason, but his eyes had turned red. Jing Ku's roar shook the hero tower a few times. Gao Jianli threw away the musical instrument in his hand, picked up a jar of liquor, and gulped it down. Looking at the back view of Fairski leaving in a panic, Wu Qi could not help but find it funny. He had just told Wu Qi that the hero tower was full of strange and evil qi. In the market of 4 Seas, this restaurant was the most messy one. From time to time, the smell of smoke and alcohol and loud noises would disturb the neighbors. However, the background of the hero tower was very strong. Even the influential officials of the market of 4 Seas would stay away from this restaurant, and no one in Ji City dared to come here and cause trouble. Yen Dan had a very solemn expression on his face. Wu Qi stared at Yen Dan's face, then suddenly asked with a soft voice, "Your Majesty, what are you afraid of?" They were the founding emperor of Great Yen Dynasty, Yen Dan, and the founders of the 5 prestigious clans who held the highest position in Great Yen Dynasty. Since the hero tower was supported by these few people, it was not a big deal for them to roast the buffalo with fire element energy stones. Of course, it was not a big deal for them to break the limbs of those princes from the vassal kingdoms and throw them out. Perhaps it was because of the notorious reputation, although it was already dinner time, and all the other restaurants in Market of 4 Seas were filled with the fragrance of wine and dishes and the voices of people. The lobby on the first floor of the hero tower was filled with people who were beaten to death. At the counter of the entrance, a burly man, whose muscles looked like they were about to explode, was holding a butcher's knife and shaving his beard. No matter how Wu Qi looked at this fierce-looking man, he didn't look like a manager at all. The restaurant that Wu Qi was about to enter was over 200 feet tall. It was built entirely with huge greenish-gray rocks, simple and unadorned. Compared to the other pavilions in Market of 4 Seas, it looked like a huge stone stick used by primitive people in the Stone Age, standing alone in a pile of exquisite and luxurious porcelain. It was an unspeakable, irksome and glaring sight. A few cracking noises were heard, as the thick and heavy flagstones under Yen Dan's feet suddenly cracked and had countless cracks on them. However, when Wu Qi looked at the few people sitting on the soft couch next to the fireplace, he had nothing to say. Gao Jianli was singing a song, his upper body bare, while Yen Dan was also bare-chested, revealing a hairy leg. He was holding a roast goose in his arms and eating crazily. Next to Yen Dan was General Yu Yi, who was nearly stripped naked, with a pair of bloodshot eyes, holding a jar of strong wine and gulping it down. Jing Ku gave Wu Qi a fierce gaze, then suddenly laughed and said, "It has nothing to do with you. Lao Tzu was just trying to scare you. You do have some guts." The hero tower was 200 feet tall and had a total of 3 floors. The third floor was a large room, measuring 300 feet in both width and length, and 100 feet in height. A fireplace was dug right in the middle of the large room. A few iron chains were hanging down from the ceiling, and a huge wild bull was being roasted to a golden and fragrant state. Inside the fireplace was a pile of fire elemental energy stones, which were stimulated by a formation. Even flames kept bursting out from these energy stones, making the wild bull squeak noisily while fat kept dripping down from it. In the main hall of the second floor, a few tables were occupied by a few guests. These guests were all clad in dark green soft armors and cloaks, with sharp swords or single-edged long blades hanging on their waist. They were all the expert guards of the palace guards. Especially the few palace guards who were guarding near the stairway leading to the third floor. They had the cultivation base of peak stage embryonic breath realm of Xiantian realm, and one of them had stepped into the realm of Jin Dan. Next to Yu, there was an old man with a simple and unsophisticated appearance, who was currently cutting a braised pig's head with a dagger while gnashing his teeth. He should be Tian Guang, who also had the title of general, and was conferred the title of Prince of Great Yan Dynasty with a different surname, and was given the fief of 5 provinces. When Wu Qi said those words, the faces of Yan Dan, Jing Ku, Gao Jianli, and a few other men instantly fell. Yan Dan smiled. He threw away the roast goose, grabbed a jar of wine and toasted Wu Qi, then he too drank the wine in one gulp. The wine was mixed with some unknown herbs, which could greatly replenish one's vitality. The wine that Wu Qi drank had at least increased his cultivation base of the foundational cultivation technique of heaven-breaking sword sect, the qi circulating technique of 5 elements, by 30 years. With his eyes glowing brightly, Wu Qi let out a loud laugh, threw away the empty jar, picked up another jar of wine and gulped it down. It was rare to see someone taking advantage of others for free. If he didn't seize this opportunity to drink a few more jars of wine, wouldn't he be wasting this opportunity? Picking up a jar of wine, Jing Ku came before Wu Qi, bowed his head and looked at Wu Qi, who was holding the wine jar and drinking to his heart's content. He laughed out loud and said, "What an interesting young lad, and you do have some guts. Hee, those descendants of ours, those good-for-nothings, would have their legs turned soft when they saw us. Yet you, a young lad, can talk and laugh in front of us. You do have some guts." A sharp gleam flashed in Jing Ku's eyes as he stared at Wu Qi and shouted, "Those illegitimate sons of Yen Buji, who killed them?" Yan Dan rose to his feet, came before Wu Qi while emanating a strong smell of wine. There was once a young master from some vassal kingdom who came to this Tower of Heroes and stirred up trouble, but in the end, they had their limbs broken and thrown out. After that incident, this Tower of Heroes was still open for business, and nothing serious happened. Hai Yuntian had told Wu Qi that, if it was not necessary, he should never get involved with the people in this tower. In this spacious room, apart from the demon bear who was fighting with Jing Ku on the platform, who glared at Wu Qi furiously, Qin Weiyang was the only one who kept throwing hostile glances at Wu Qi. All the others were laughing out loud, raising up their wine cups and drinking to their heart's content. This Hai Yuntian is a man with a kind heart. Wu Qi smiled sheepishly. He was thinking to himself that if he wanted to buy something in the future, he could just look for him directly. As for the backer and all sorts of strange deeds of this Tower of Heroes, one could easily tell from the man who showed his head and smashed the wine jars just now. The mighty chief general of Great Yan Dynasty, Jing Ku, was standing in the tower and smashing wine jars. It was not hard to imagine the background of this Tower of Heroes. Seeing that Wu Qi was about to walk into the Tower of Heroes, Hai Yuntian's expression changed rapidly. He pondered for a while, then hastily stopped Wu Qi, said a few words to him, and was about to take his leave. But before he spun and left, Hai Yuntian finally gave Wu Qi a hurried murmur under his breath out of kindness. After that he spun and left hastily. Gao Jianli suddenly stopped smashing the wine jars, looked at Wu Qi, laughed and said, "Well said. This is the Tower of Heroes, not the Tower of Kowtowing." using the spirit flame ignited by the fire element energy stones to grill the beast. What a generous method! Wu Qi stared at the huge fire pit, which had a diameter of over 50 feet. He could not help but have his mouth twitch. How many energy stones would it cost to grill a wild bull with this method? Couldn't they just use charcoal instead? Meng Xiaobai and the others were stopped, and only Wu Qi was allowed to step onto the stairs and go up to the third floor. Jing Ke narrowed his eyes, sneered and said, "We don't care about the life and death of those guys. But, is the death of Yan Buji related to your young master?" A thick, crooked wooden board was hung above the crude door of the restaurant, and 3 large characters, Tower of Heroes, were carved on it. At first glance, the handwriting looked like it was made by a chicken claw, messy and extremely ugly to look at. Only those with a sufficient cultivation base could pay close attention to the handwriting, and only then would they be able to see a wisp of extremely strong will hidden in the handwriting, an unyielding spirit that seemed to swear to poke a hole in the sky. Jing Ke, who had just smashed a wine jar on the street and called Wu Qi to come upstairs, was seen swaying on a platform in the innermost part of the restaurant, wrestling with a demon bear that stood over 20 feet tall and had a full body of greenish-golden scales. A cold green gleam shone from the demon bear's eyes, and there was a faint halo that shrouded its body. Obviously, it had also transformed into the Jin Dan, a demon immortal who had gained human nature. The bear was spitting saliva, howling and struggling with Jing Ke. The man and the beast were pouncing on each other, causing the entire restaurant to shake violently. Wu Qi rolled his eyes, sneered at Jing Ke and said, "Just because of this question? Didn't the scouting office manage to find out the truth? In order to let our young master inherit the title of Duke Yenlu, Tai clan and Lu clan of Lu Kingdom joined hands and killed those young masters. What's so strange about that?" After giving Wu Qi a thorough once-over, these waiters snorted deeply and watched as Wu Qi and his company walked up the stairs and came to the second floor of the restaurant. He smashed the wine jar forcefully on the ground and broke it into pieces. Yan Dan laughed out loud and said, "Little fellow, your name is Wu Qi? Aren't you afraid of meeting me? Aren't you going to kneel down and greet me?" Throwing the wine jar away, Wu Qi sprung to his feet, pointed his finger at Jing Ke and said with a smile, "Why did Chief General say that? Putting everything aside, with the overall strength of Tai clan and Lu clan, do you think they can kill Yan Buji? If Chief General wants to investigate the case, please don't start with our young master." Wu Qi admitted that we have killed a group of young masters who have not been acknowledged yet. But the death of the former Duke Yan Lu has nothing to do with our young master. Jing Ke gave a loud shout, kicked the demon bear a few steps back, wiped off his sweat and walked down from the platform. The demon bear threw his head back and let out a gloomy roar into the sky. Slowly his body twisted and turned, transforming into a burly man with a dark green body. Then he sat down on the platform with a gloomy expression. When Wu Qi mentioned the Black Bear House, he had greatly offended this demon bear. Wu Qi gave Jing Ke and Yan a deep look, smiled faintly and said, "Chief General, did you ask Wu Qi to come up here just to frighten a little fellow? No matter how bored Chief General is, I don't think you would be that bored." Chapter 112. Are you afraid? With both hands clasped behind his back, Yan Dan turned his head and stared blankly at a small patch of sky outside the window. The sky was filled with a bright red glow. Layers of fish-scale clouds were spreading out, and flocks of birds were flying back and forth in the clouds at top speed. A few sky-patrolling eagle guards of scouting office were seen wheeling in the sky, their bodies shrouded in a faint blue glow. Occasionally, a bright gleam could be seen flickering in their eyes as they glanced down at the ground. "Little fellow, I, Yan Dan, own the land of Great Yen spanning hundreds of thousands of miles, over 100 vassal kingdoms, thousands of cities of different sizes that have yet to be built, and billions of people under my rule. I, Yan Dan, have tens of millions of mighty soldiers, hundreds of thousands of cultivators, and tens of thousands of human immortals who have formed the Jin Dan. I, Yan Dan, have been cultivating arduously for over 2,000 years, and my cultivation base has reached the limit of the Jin Dan realm. With just one more step, I will form my nascent soul, and I will have the hope of living a free and unfettered life. Taking a deep breath, Yen Dan fixed his eyes on Wu Qi, sneered and said, "With such a strong power of the nation, and such a strong cultivation base, what is there for Yen Dan to be afraid of?" Looking at Yen Dan's solemn face, his flickering eyes, and the hesitation in his eyes, Wu Qi took a deep breath and said, "If you are not afraid, why is your majesty so nervous about the death of Duke Yen Lu? Great Yen has been peaceful for over 2,000 years, but it doesn't mean that it will remain peaceful forever. Humans have their own emotions, and all kinds of gratitude and grudges will be entangled. Don't tell me that no one dares to assassinate Duke Yen Lu?" Wu Qi continued, "It is perfectly normal for Duke Yen Lu to be assassinated. It could be done by any of the 8 princes, or any monarch of a vassal kingdom, or any member of the imperial clan, or any noble. It could also be that Yen Buji had stolen the wife of an expert, and was killed by that person as revenge. With the death of a duke from the imperial clan, why is your majesty so nervous? If that is not fear, then what is it?" He smiled faintly, grabbed a jar of strong wine next to his feet, and gulped it down. After that, he burped and continued, "Your majesty has been cultivating for over 2,000 years, and you have already reached the limit of Gold Core Realm? Jin Dan human immortals can live up to 800 years, and your majesty must have consumed countless life-prolonging spirit pills to live until now. However, when I saw your majesty riding on a flying sword a few days ago, the ripples of energy emanating from your majesty's body were as strong as the combined force of over 100 human immortals." He took a deep breath, stared straight into Yen Dan's eyes, and cried out, "If your majesty is not afraid of something, why does your heart feel so stagnant?" His majesty's dermic power and cultivation base were comparable to the joint effort of over 100 human immortals of Gold Core Realm. If it were someone else, he or she would have long formed 10 nascent souls. If you are not unable to kill the devil in your heart, then why are you hesitating for so many years at the limit of the Jin Dan realm? Yen Dan, Jing Ku, Gao Jianli, and Chi Chi took a deep breath. The joints in their bodies twisted and their muscles tightened, producing buzzing noises that sounded like the vibration of the strings of a zither. A strong dark green gleam shone from Yen Dan's eyes as he stared fixedly at Wu Qi and said coldly, "There is a devil in Yen Dan's heart? Why is Yen Dan not aware of it?" After over 2,000 years of laborious cultivation, he still could not break through the Jin Dan realm, because Yen Dan opened his mouth and stared blankly at the ceiling. He had nothing to say. A Jin Dan realm human immortal could live up to 800 years. Within 800 years, an ordinary cultivator would either form his nascent soul, transform into an earth immortal, and live a free and unfettered life, gaining an additional 3,000 years of life. Or, they would have died long ago, leaving only a thread of their soul in the cycle of transmigration. However, no matter it was Yen Dan, Jing Ku, or Gao Jianli, the energy accumulated in their bodies was at least 100 times greater than that of an ordinary Jin Dan realm human immortal. Although their cultivation base was close to the extreme, they still could not break through their gold cores and form their nascent souls. If not because they were the few most important core members of Great Yen Dynasty and were supplied with a large amount of life-prolonging spirit herbs, Yen Dan and his companions would have turned into ashes over 1,000 years ago. So what if you already possess a formidable energy equivalent to a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator when you were still in the Jin Dan realm? Since they could not form their nascent souls, their lifespan was only 800 years, and their overall strength could only be considered as an abnormal human immortal. Shaking his head, Wu Qi gave Yen Dan a look, then turned to Jing Ku and Gao Jianli. "The wind is blowing, the water is cold, and the brave warrior will never return. What a magnificent spirit! What a peerless hero! You have the courage to unleash a strike that can slay a dragon. To be able to sing such a song and do such a deed, Chief General and Deputy Prime Minister are both heroes, possessing great wisdom, courage, and willpower. So, why can't you see through that little devil in your heart and take another step forward? It is nothing more than breaking your gold core and forming your nascent soul. What is there to be afraid of? Just like Yen Dan, Gao Jianli had his mouth wide open, but he couldn't make any sound for a long while. On the other side, Jing Ke's eyes shone with a golden gleam. Suddenly, he threw his head back and laughed. "You're right, little boy. In those years, Lao Tzu dared to assassinate him with only a dagger in his hand. So, what is there to be afraid of now? Your Majesty, the great yen you have now, is it the great yen of those years? You now have a mighty army of 10 million soldiers, and over 10 billion people. Are you still afraid of that man? In those years, we were able to fight with our lives on the line, let alone now? What are we afraid of? What are we afraid of?" Gao Jianli let out a long and loud cry as well. Vaguely, there was the sound of metal clashing, resounding through the clouds. He cried out sternly, "What Jing Ke said is right. In those years, we were able to fight with our lives on the line, not to mention that we are not necessarily weaker than him today. Your Majesty, don't you forget that after that man's death, he was deserted by all his people and did not even have a trusted follower. On the other hand, we have this group of brothers, and the spirit of brotherhood. With us together, why should we be afraid of him?" Both Jing Ke and Gao Jianli's clothes were ripped and torn at the same time, while large patches of skin on their bodies cracked and disintegrated. Vaguely, new skin as fair as jade was growing out from under their cracked skin, emitting a strong golden gleam. Vaguely, cracking noises could be heard coming from their dantian, while waves of powerful and suffocating energy kept rushing out from their bodies, rolling and rocking wantonly within the Tower of Heroes. Suddenly, a large sheet of bright light burst out from within the Tower of Heroes, as countless talismans and formation diagrams rushed out, tightly restraining the energy waves emanating from both men within the tower. Even though the inside of the tower had been thrown into a mess by the energy waves unleashed by Jing Ke and Gao Jianli, the people outside the tower did not feel anything. Suddenly, Qin Weiyang and Tian Guang threw their heads back and let out a long and loud cry into the sky. "Little boy, your words have awakened us. We are not the same as we were in the past. The man today is not the same as he was in the past. We have gone through all kinds of hardships to build the foundation we have today, and we are now at the peak of the power of the dynasty with a strong army. So, why should we be afraid of him?" Tian Guang raised up a blue longsword and sprayed out a stream of sword energy into the sky. The skin on his body exploded as well, while an enormous sword energy shot out from his dantian. Qin Weiyang's long hair stood straight up, while two strong beams shot out from his eyes that were as sharp as swords. A bright light flickered and flickered around his body. Just like the few others, he quickly entered the process of breaking his gold core and forming his nascent soul. Yen Dan stared blankly at Wu Qi. After a long while, he suddenly burst into a loud laughter and said, Wu Qi, I never thought that you are actually the opportunity for us to break through the inner devil and become an earth immortal. Yes, what is Dan afraid of? Is he afraid of death? Many years ago, my head was chopped off by my father and sent to that man on a golden tray. My soul was roaring and roaring furiously in the head, but what could I do? I've already died once, yet I still can't see through this after over 2,000 years of hard work. What a waste of 2,000 years of painstaking cultivation. An energy ripple that was much stronger and stronger than that of Jing Ke and the others was slowly rippling out from Yen Dan's body. The skin on Yen Dan's body was also breaking off piece by piece, revealing the newly born skin underneath that was as fair as jade and glowing with a dazzling glow. Yen Dan took a deep breath, murmuring to himself with a voice that sounded as if he was immersed in enjoyment, Come. If you are the same as Dan and have come to this place, let us continue our destined war. This time, Dan will definitely chop off your head, place it on a tray and admire it day and night. And this time, Dan will never lose to you again. The Great Yen Dynasty today is not the Great Yen Dynasty of the past. The Emperor of Great Yen Dynasty today is me, Ji Dan, and not that father of mine. Dan has brothers, a code of brotherhood, countless clans, tens of billions of people, a boundless land, tens of millions of mighty armies, and countless generals. What is there for Dan to be afraid of? Laughing wildly, Yen Dan fished out a token of 8 swallows from his sleeve and threw it over to Wu Qi, then cried out in a deep voice, "Ma Yi, record this imperial decree. Confer Wu Qi with the title of Marquis Tianyun of Great Yen Dynasty, and grant him 130 cities of Huayang Dynasty." Ma Yi, with a red face and a height of over 10 feet, appeared out of nowhere and answered with a solemn expression. His eyes were filled with admiration and envy when he looked at Wu Qi. With some nonsense, he had tricked a few of the most important people in Great Yen Dynasty into breaking their gold cores and forming their nascent souls, officially stepping into the realm of Earth Immortals. He had even given himself the title of Marquis Tianyun, granting him 130 cities of Huayang Dynasty. The luck of this Wu Qi was so good that it was infuriating. Huayang Dynasty was the most famous land of fish and rice in Great Yen Dynasty, one of the commercial centers. Not only was it rich in products, the annual tax revenue was also an astronomical figure. Although Wu Qi only granted 130 cities of Huayang Dynasty, the annual tax revenue from it was roughly equal to the income of 1/3 of an ordinary province. In Great Yen Dynasty, unless one was from a meritorious clan or a member of the imperial clan, it was extremely difficult for anyone to obtain the lowest title of nobility. How could it be as easy as Wu Qi? With just a few words, he had become a marquis. Ma Yi glared fiercely at Wu Qi, whose face was filled with a smile, and narrowed his eyes. The ripples of energy emanating from Yen Dan's body were getting stronger and stronger, and the frequency was getting faster and faster. He forcefully suppressed the energy tide in his body, beckoned at the demon bear sitting on the platform and said, "Xiongqing, you and a few of your brothers will be working for Marquis Tianyun today. Be careful and work hard. Don't be greedy for wine, don't hurt anyone without reason, and don't transform into a demon at midnight and fool around in the beast park of Imperial Palace. Do you understand?" The tall and burly man, Xiongqing, was struck dumb. With a frown on his face, he came next to Wu Qi reluctantly, cupped his fist and bowed to Yen Dan with a low, muffled voice. Yen Dan smiled at Wu Qi, pointed his finger at Xiongqing and said, "This fellow and his brothers are a total of 12 demon bears who have transformed into human form. Their skin and flesh are tough, and they can be of some use. You can use them as well. Let them work for you in the future." After assigning Xiongqing to Wu Qi, Yen Dan's expression changed abruptly. Hastily, he ordered Wu Qi and his men to leave at once. After that, a few beams flashed across the sky, as he, Jing Ku, and all the other men had transformed into beams and disappeared without a trace. When breaking the gold core, forming the nascent soul and stepping into the realm of Earth Immortal, there would be a thunder tribulation. No one knew where Yen Dan and his men had gone to, as they had to rely on the defensive formations that they had prepared beforehand to transcend the tribulation. So, how could they have the time to argue with Wu Qi here? Wu Qi weighed the token of 8 swallows in his hand, and couldn't help but let out a loud laugh. With this token, he could absolutely do whatever he wanted in Ji City, right? Then, he turned to look at Xiongqing, who had a reluctant expression on his face. This fellow had 11 brothers? And all of them were demon bears who had transformed into human form? That was a total of 12 demon bears who had formed the Jin Dan. Demons, these were real demons, and this was the first time in Wu Qi's life that he had seen a demon that only existed in the legends. However, Wu Qi had unintentionally offended this big black bear with his words just now. After pondering for a while, he patted on Xiongqing's shoulder. "Big brother Xiongqing, from now on, you can follow Wu Qi. You can eat big bowls of wine, eat big chunks of meat, and hack people with a big blade. Wu Qi will guarantee you a happy life." After a brief pause, Wu Qi let out a strange laugh and said, "With a token of 8 swallows, Big brother Xiongqing can go to the beast park and fool around in the bear den at midnight. Wu Qi will personally clear the way for you." Upon hearing what Wu Qi said, Xiongqing, who had a belly full of anger just a moment ago, smiled sweetly and hugged Wu Qi, calling him a good brother. Chapter 113. Deep in the night, a loud snoring that sounded like rolling thunder was heard coming out from Duke Yen Li's mansion, shaking the ground and making it tremble slightly. Just now, when Wu Qi returned to the mansion, he briefly told Lu Qingfeng about what happened today. When Lu Qingfeng learned that Wu Qi was conferred the title of Marquis Tianyun by Yan Dan, and was given the fief of 130 cities, while also assigning 12 demon bears who had formed the Jin Dan to follow Wu Qi, he couldn't help but let out a loud cry of joy. Hastily, he ordered his men to prepare good wine and meat and serve them to him. A grand banquet was held in Duke Yan Li's mansion to celebrate Wu Qi's great fortune today. As a result, under Wu Qi's intentional action, Lu Qingfeng, Xiong Qing, and a few other men were half-dead drunk and were now sleeping soundly in their rooms. The snoring that sounded like rolling thunder was coming from Xiong Qing and his brothers. When these 12 demon bears were drunk, they would transform into bears. When 12 huge black bears, each with a height of 20 to 30 feet, were snoring together, the snoring would definitely make a man with a weak nervous system feel so painful that he would want to commit suicide. Wu Qi viciously speculated, "Is this the reason why Yan Dan so generously threw Xiong Qing and his brothers to me?" From the lake in the backyard, Wu Qi sucked out a hazy layer of water vapor. Using the cover of the water vapor, he transformed into a sharp arrow and sped out of Duke Yan Li's mansion, heading straight towards Mount White Sun outside the city. Upon leaving the city, Wu Qi took out a lower-tier magical item flying sword and transformed into a 3-feet-long, blurry sword beam. Carefully sticking close to the bushes and trees, he flew all the way towards Mount White Sunday. While flying on the flying sword, Wu Qi kept marveling at what he had seen and heard today. Because of the devil in their hearts, Yan Dan and his brothers hadn't been able to break through the Jin Dan realm. Just a few words of nonsense had actually allowed them to successfully break through. He really didn't know what they had been cultivating for over 2,000 years. There were also the 12 Xiongqing brothers. They were monsters, real monsters, bear demons who had formed the Jin Dan. If they were on Earth, they would definitely be captured and dissected for research. They might even be locked in an iron cage and have hundreds of milliliters of bear bile extracted every day. This was bear bile produced by a demonic bear that had turned into a spirit. Its effects were much stronger than those of ordinary black bears. Monsters, they really are monsters. Wu Qi sighed again and again. He was amazed by the wonders of this world. In the blue sky, thin layers of white clouds slowly floated by. A large number of stars dotted the sky, illuminating the world. Wu Qi rode on the sword light and flew against the wind in this quiet night. He felt as if he was floating and out of this world. What a marvelous and magnificent world! Suddenly, Wu Qi had a sudden realization. His footsteps were definitely not limited to this great Yan dynasty, but this tiny piece of sky. In the future, he would definitely follow the various records in Scroll of Stealing, visiting all kinds of magical places, visiting them and visiting them. He wanted to stand at the peak of this world, and then enjoy all kinds of more magnificent and incredible wonders. Great Yan dynasty was just a beginning, and it was far from the end. Within the water meridians in both his arms, 2 water element Jin Dan kept rushing out pure and condensed energies. Driven by the energies, Wu Qi's flying speed was at least 2 times faster than the single-horned deer. In just 15 minutes, he had arrived at the front gate of Mount White Sunday. Without alerting anyone, he went straight into the mountain. The defensive formation of Mount White Sun was repaired by someone later on. The highest level of formation that could be mastered by the masters of formation in Great Yan Dynasty was merely 8 pillars, which barely reached the level of 8 trigrams formation. Heaven-breaking swordsmanship sect didn't have any formation masters trained by themselves, and the formation masters hired from outside didn't do their best to set up the mountain-protecting formation for heaven-breaking swordsmanship sect. They could only set up a reverse 5 elements heavenly fire and ice formation, which consisted of 5 main pillars. Wu Qi simply ignored such a crude formation. He went through the defensive formation, avoided some small and exquisite defensive mechanisms, and carefully avoided a couple dozens of teams of heaven-breaking sword sect's disciples who were patrolling at night. Stealthily, Wu Qi arrived at the foot of the main peak of Mount White Sunday. The surroundings were quiet and devoid of people. Wu Qi took a deep breath. Suddenly, a large sheet of water vapor rippled around him, transforming into a few wisps of drifting clouds. They rolled him up and brought him up to the top of the cliff along with a gust of night breeze. Wu Qi's body disappeared amidst the watery clouds. The watery cloud spell, a water elemental escape art from Scroll of Stealing, had concealed Wu Qi's figure. His body transformed into a drifting cloud, and without alerting the large flock of white cranes on the cliff, he arrived at the top of the cliff. The top of the cliff, which was smashed by the thunderbolts unintentionally unleashed by Princess Zhongli during the day, had been filled up, and only the ancient pine trees that were smashed by the thunderbolts were nowhere to be seen. There was no one on the top of the cliff. Without hesitation, Wu Qi raised his head and looked at the sky, then hastily leaped into the cave of sword stems from the mind, striding past the few layers of defensive mechanisms and formation diagrams. It was as if the triple-layered illusory formation on the outer layer was nothing to him, while under the skillful control of Wu Qi's incantation, the formation formed by 108 pillars in the inner layer didn't play any role and was easily crossed by him. At this moment, Wu Qi's eyes glowed with a deep sense of gratitude towards the man who taught him the Scroll of Stealing. Without the profound knowledge of formations found in the Scroll of Stealing, how could he come into this place so easily? After all, this was the core region of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, the sect that ranked first among all 13 immortal sects of Great Yan Dynasty. Stealthily, Wu Qi entered the cave. With a single step, he crossed the small river that was filled with an incredible amount of natural energies. He did not take the Jade Bridge, which was installed with at least 18 warning mechanisms. The cave was filled with natural energies, and the natural energies had condensed into a white mist, drifting in all directions. Transforming into a white cloud, Wu Qi quickly took a round in the cave along with the white mist. Very soon he found out what the people in the cave were doing. Nie Baihong was not in the cave, and he should have his own residence as the sect leader. There were 16 Jin Dan human immortals in the cave. Among them, 2 of them were mid-stage Jin Dan cultivators, while the other 14 had just formed their Jin Dan. Each of them had occupied a pavilion, sitting in meditation and circulating their energy, preparing for the nighttime cultivation of a cultivator. In the deepest part of the cave, in a small crafting room that was built into the mountain wall, Nie Yaonu was seen crafting 3 flying swords that were glowing with a fiery glow with the flame of magma from the Earth's core. As the energy of the magma from the Earth's core was too strong, the surging flame energy spread out in all directions, nearly dispersing the invisible watery cloud. Wu Qi stole a glance at Nie Yaonu, who was wholeheartedly practicing her swords. After that, he dared not to look at her any longer, and hastily left the crafting room. With just a quick glance, Wu Qi had a rough idea of Nie Yaonu's crafting level. All 3 flying swords were made from pretty good materials, and they were made from the red child iron of fire and thunder extracted from the magma from the Earth's core, which was at least 10,000 years old. It had an extremely strong and yang nature, and was the best material for crafting fire element magical treasures. However, the 3 flying swords crafted by Nie Yaonu could at most reach the standard of upper-grade magical treasures, as the materials and supplementary materials used did not match with them. Judging from the sweaty look on Nie Yaonu's face, Wu Qi could tell that she had spent all her energy in crafting these 3 flying swords. However, crafting a magical treasure was a technical task that required talent and aptitude. Although Nie Yaonu had spent so much effort in crafting the swords, in the end, she could only craft 3 upper-grade magical treasures that were infinitely close to lower-grade magical treasures. With Wu Qi's vision after inheriting the Scroll of Stealing, he would not even bother to steal upper-grade magical treasures. Shaking his head, Wu Qi spun and entered the peerless pavilion of sword formation, walking slowly to the portrait of immortal Zhen Yi that was worshipped right in the middle of the pavilion. He gave immortal Zhen Yi a glance, who was riding on the back of a flood dragon and had his face blurred. Wu Qi bowed to him, then a watery cloud rushed out from under his feet. Soundlessly, it carried him up to one of the pillars on the roof, and carefully approached the dustless lamp. There are 3 types of innate spirit items in a dustless lamp. If these 3 innate spirit items are left behind by immortal Jin Yi, then his tier is at least the same as the legendary primordial immortal. Those are innate spirit items. If he is not a primordial immortal, how could he get his hands on them? And how could he be so generous as to leave them behind for his juniors? However, the defensive formation left behind in the abode of a primordial immortal is really lousy. And the sword techniques left behind by him are missing the sword techniques of earth and fire. Is he trying to play a joke on his juniors? Although he left behind 3 innate spirit items, he is missing 2 sword techniques of 5 elements. I'm sure Yen Dan and his companions are the same Yen Dan I know, Jing Ku and Gao Jianli who assassinated Emperor Qin. But how did they get here? Moreover, Yen Dan had said in the daytime that his head had been chopped off by his father and brought to the Qin emperor. His soul was still in his head, so he had seen everything clearly. He is already dead, so how could he still be here? While all kinds of thoughts were running through his mind, Wu Qi was carefully dismantling the dustless lamp. With a flip of his palm, Wu Qi exercised the hand of web soundlessly, absorbing a thread of innate earth element energy from the innate dust parting stone into his body, quickly storing it in the earth meridians in his arms. After that, he placed his palm close to the innate awakening wood element energy, absorbing the thread of innate wood element energy and storing it in the wood meridians in his arms. After harvesting the earth and wood innate energies, Wu Qi felt his body was filled with a refreshing feeling. Upon entering his body, the 2 threads of innate earth element energy began to fuse with his corporeal body. The innate earth element energy made Wu Qi's corporeal strength stronger and stronger, and the innate wood element energy made his body more resilient, and the life force contained in his body more vigorous. In addition to that, the innate wood element could generate wind, and the wind and rain could turn into thunder, which made Wu Qi's agility and the explosive force of his muscles improve bit by bit. Finally, all that was left was the most powerful and rarest divine flame of order. With 70% caution, Wu Qi carefully extracted a thread of innate fire element energy from the divine flame of order and fused it into his fire meridians. After that, he clenched his jaws and took a deep breath, then unleashed his divine sense from his forehead, sucking the thumb-sized, 1 foot and 2-inch long purple-green divine flame into his spiritual ocean. A vast purple-green divine flame exploded crazily in Wu Qi's vast spiritual ocean, sending countless sparks in all directions. Suddenly, a huge wave emerged from the several thousand feet long pool of water in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, quickly wrapping around the rampaging divine flame and forcefully merging all the sparks back into one. Wu Qi's spiritual energy was being consumed at an incredible speed. He kept using his spiritual energy to form one profound rune after another in his spiritual ocean, cooperating with the water waves in his spiritual ocean to suppress the divine flame of order. All these runes came from the inheritance of Scroll of Stealing, and were specialized in restraining all Yang and Yin flames under the heaven, both tangible and intangible. It was the most ingenious divine art of controlling fire under the heaven. 108 crimson runes formed purely from his divine sense wrapped tightly around the divine flame of order in his spiritual ocean. Finally, Wu Qi breathed out a sigh of relief. Looking at the dustless lamp, which was still in perfect condition, apart from the 3 innate energies which were stolen by Wu Qi and the divine flame of order, Wu Qi hastily took out all kinds of materials he bought from Market of 4 Seas during the daytime from his storage ring. Using the oil of the merman, which could last for 10,000 years, as the wick, and a few other materials as the auxiliary materials, a thread of purple-green flame once again burned in the dustless lamp. After that, he used the soul-breaking worm, the dust barrier, golden spider silk, and some other materials to construct a small restrictive formation on the dustless lamp. With that, Wu Qi had successfully completed the task of stealing the innate spirit items. Using these rare and precious items as the materials, he constructed a restrictive formation that could keep away the dust and calm the mind, which could unleash about 30% of the original dustless lamp's effect. As long as the oil of the merman did not dry up, no one would ever find out that the dustless lamp was not the original one. However, a single drop of the oil could burn for 100 years. Therefore, Wu Qi had added 200 grams of the oil into the dustless lamp, which would allow the lamp to burn for 10,000 years. Therefore, he did not have to worry that someone would find out that the dustless lamp was stolen in a short period of time. After giving a satisfied look at the restrictive formation he constructed, Wu Qi stealthily transformed into a wisp of cloud and flew out of Mount White Sunday. Chapter 114. Early morning. Last night, when Princess Zhonglu returned to the imperial palace, because of the quarrel she had with Xiongqing, Princess Zhonglu was in a bad mood. She threw her head back and let out a long and loud cry into the sky. As a result, the entire Ji city was hit by a thunderstorm for the entire night. Early in the morning, perhaps it was because Princess Zhongli's mood had recovered, the clouds had dispersed and the rain had stopped. The sky in the east was now glowing with a red hue. It was another fine day. A night of wind and rain had washed the Ji city clean and pleasant. The air was filled with fresh water vapor. Wu Qi was standing on the rooftop, facing the east and regulating his breath. He was in a great mood, feeling that every single cell in his body was cheering excitedly. The four innate energies of earth, wood, fire, and water were flowing ceaselessly in the meridians in both his arms. The heaviness of earth, the vigor of wood, the warmth of fire, and the lightness of water, these four wonderful sensations were rolling and rocking inside his body. Vaguely, a four-colored auspicious gleam could be seen flashing in Wu Qi's eyes, and his entire body was filled with a powerful force. It had been 1 month since he found the 3 innate spirit items in the dustless lamp. Because of the foundation of the water chapter, and the fact that he had formed 2 water element Jin Dan in his water meridians, Wu Qi's speed in cultivating the source of earth chapter, fire chapter, and wood chapter had been progressing at a tremendous pace. Every single day he would make great progress. Currently, these 3 cultivation techniques had all reached the stage of meridian nurturing, and his meridians had been carefully tempered by the innate energies of 3 different elements for over 100 times. As a result, the strength and flexibility of Wu Qi's meridians had nearly reached the standard of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. At this moment, standing on the rooftop, facing the morning sun in the east, he was absorbing and spitting out the first thread of innate purple energy that was produced by the heaven and earth every day. The airflow was rolling and rolling around Wu Qi's body, making him feel like he was about to soar into the sky and soar into the sky. After a full quarter of an hour, when the rising sun rose from the eastern horizon, emitting a boundless red light that illuminated the world, Wu Qi slowly stopped his cultivation. 3 streams of white smoke spurted out from his mouth and nostrils, and only slowly dissipated after reaching a distance of over 10 feet. Lu Qingfeng leaped onto the roof and hastily did some breathing exercises facing the east. Then he rubbed his sleepy eyes and let out a long sigh. In the future, it would be best if Xiongqing and Princess Zhonglu don't meet each other. That boorish fellow offends people easily with his words. If you hadn't stopped him yesterday, Princess Zhonglu would have hacked him to pieces. After stretching his body, Wu Qi sent his soul sense into the storage ring. Looking at the various top-grade spirit stones piled up like a mountain inside, Wu Qi said indifferently, "It's okay, it's okay." Princess Zhongli's face is disgusting and soft. She said she wanted to kill someone, but she couldn't do it. She also knows that Xiongqing and his brothers are a bunch of brainless idiots. Why would she care about them? The storage ring was filled with top-grade spirit stones of the 5 elements: gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. Some of these spirit stones came from the spirit stone mines in Lu Qingfeng's territory, some were gifts from the 130 cities of Huayang, Wu Qi's current fief, and some were secretly given to Wu Qi by Princess Zhonglu this month. She knew that Wu Qi was practicing the qi circulating technique of 5 elements of heaven-splitting swordsmanship sect. Fearing that Wu Qi's progress would be slow, she hurriedly gave a lot of spirit stones of the 5 elements to Wu Qi. A beauty's kindness is the hardest to bear. Wu Qi looked at the various spirit stones in the ring, feeling a bit happy but distressed. He made up his mind that if Xiongqing talked nonsense after drinking again, saying that he wanted Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli to get on the bed and have babies, he would definitely find an iron rod himself and let Xiongqing know what pain in the ass was. You could have said this to me in private. Why did you talk nonsense in front of Princess Zhongli? She's a young girl. You, a boorish bear spirit, are asking for trouble. Thinking of Xiongqing and his brothers, who were struck by a series of thunderbolts last night, Wu Qi could only shake his head. Lu Qingfeng also stretched his back. Looking at a flock of birds flying high in the sky, he said with a smile, "That's true. Princess Zhongli clearly knows what kind of people Xiongqing and his brothers are, so she won't really do anything to them. Xiongqing and his brothers, after all, are imperial high officials personally conferred by His Majesty. Aren't they afraid that Princess Zhongli will really order them to be beheaded? They don't care if they suffer some physical pain." While the two of them were discussing how Xiongqing's words last night had caused Princess Zhongli to fly into a rage, the sounds of Xiongqing and his brothers doing their morning exercises could be heard coming from the backyard below. 12 mutated violent bears, ranging from 20 to 30 feet in height, with bodies covered in scales and black fur, had reverted to their original forms. They were grinding their teeth and rubbing their palms together as they pounced on each other in the backyard. The beautiful backyard had been smashed into pieces, and the ground was shaking faintly as if there was an earthquake. Xiongqing and his brothers were doing their morning exercises as if they were fighting their mortal enemies. They exerted all their strength in every move they made, which made Wu Qi's eyes twitch. A loud boom rang out as Xiongqing's youngest brother, Xiong Bubao, was sent flying nearly 1,000 feet away by a bare paw from his 3 elder brothers. He immediately coughed out a mouthful of blood. Lu Qingfeng shuddered when he saw this. Unconsciously, he leaped off the roof and spun away. These boorish fellows were addicted to fighting again. Once they went mad, they would attack with all their strength, regardless of who they were. Lu Qingfeng, who had nearly been killed by them a few times, no longer dared to stay near them. Looking at Xiong Bubao's miserable state, Wu Qi shuddered and hastily spun and fled. While chasing after Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi shouted, "Today, Zhuguijing Mansion will have to make a decision regarding the fight between the Gaoling Kingdom and the Lishan Kingdom for the gold mine in the upper reaches of Tsanglang River. Should the gold mine be divided between the Gaoling Kingdom or the Lishan Kingdom, or should they share it equally? We need to come up with a solution as soon as possible. The 300,000 soldiers of both kingdoms have been facing each other across the river, and the war is about to break out." Lu Qingfeng halted his steps, his brows knitted into a tight frown. While walking side by side, both men were discussing how to handle this matter. As the Zhuguijing of Great Yan Dynasty, he was responsible for supervising and mediating all kinds of state affairs for the 37 vassal kingdoms in the west of Great Yan Dynasty. When two kingdoms were fighting over various mineral resources, they would need to be mediated by the Prime Minister's office of the suzerain kingdom. However, such disputes usually involved great benefits, and the parties involved were not two individuals, but two vassal kingdoms with formidable national forces. If the dispute was not handled properly, it would bring about a great trouble. While discussing along the way, Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng were having a headache. The case of two kingdoms fighting over the gold mine was submitted to them half a month ago. However, the information submitted was vague and unclear, and they couldn't even figure out which kingdom the forest in the upper reaches of Tsanglang River belonged to. With such a case, how could Lu Qingfeng make a judgment? After discussing for some time, when they were about to reach the main entrance of Duke Yanli's mansion, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh, spread his arms, sneered and said, "Why don't we do it this way? Didn't both sides send out an army of 300,000 soldiers? Let the 300,000 soldiers start the war. With a time limit of 3 days, we'll divide the profit of the gold mine according to the number of soldiers who died in the war. This will be fair and reasonable." Upon hearing Wu Qi's extremely irresponsible words, Lu Qingfeng nearly fell to the ground. He glared angrily at Wu Qi from the corner of his eyes, scolded in a low voice, "Are you afraid that His Majesty won't find fault with me? This idea, I can't do it, I can never do it." Wu Qi shrugged and shook his head disapprovingly. Speaking of Yan Dan, Wu Qi found it strange as well. Over a month ago, Yen Dan and his company had indeed entered the process of breaking their gold core and forming their nascent soul. Over the past few days, Yen Dan had officially started attending the imperial court, but there was no news about him, Jing Ku, and his company forming their nascent souls. Could it be that they had purposely concealed this fact? Although Wu Qi had his doubts about this, he was not stupid enough to ask around about it. He just kept it in the bottom of his heart, quietly waiting to see what Yen Dan and his company were going to do next. When Princess Zhang Le formed her Jin Dan, there was a great celebration. But this time, when so many of them formed their nascent souls at the same time, nothing happened. It was really strange. With these questions in mind, Wu Qi walked out from the main entrance of Duke Yen Li's mansion and happened to see a row of pitch-black coaches speeding towards Duke Yen Li's mansion on the main street in front of the mansion. Along the way, the coaches shouted at a few ministers who were about to rush to their own office, and came straight to the main entrance with an unbridled arrogance. Those ministers who were yelled at and forced to bring their guards to the side of the road seemed to have recognized the owner of the coaches. Their faces were filled with resentment, and they kept running far away from them. There were even a few ministers who kept throwing their glances over, pointing their fingers at Duke Yen Li's mansion and discussing something. Looking at the coaches, Wu Qi coughed lightly. Then, Zhang Hu and Hu Wei led a large group of guards and rushed down the stairs, stopping before the coaches. Luo Kadi and Ma Yang stood on the left and right side of Lu Qingfeng, shielding him. Luo Kadi cried out sternly, "Who are you? Stop the coaches at once. This is Duke Yen Li's mansion. No one is allowed to cause trouble here." The coaches behaved rudely. Although Zhang Hu and a few other guards were standing before the coaches, they still acted as if they couldn't rein in the reins and continued galloping several tens of feet forward, forcing Zhang Hu and his men to back off until they reached the stairs in front of the mansion. 4 crocatas pulled by the black coach at the front came to the top of the stairs in front of Duke Yen Li's mansion, and only then did they stop slowly while snorting angrily. Wu Qi glared at them. A cold gleam flashed across his body as he drew out the sword of Greedy Wolf and was about to swing it down. But Lu Qingfeng had already taken a few steps forward, staring at the coach that was about to rush up the stairs, and cried out, "Don't you think you are being too arrogant and domineering? What are you trying to do by driving straight into my mansion?" The doors of those coaches suddenly opened, and a couple dozens of guards clad in black armor walked out in a single file. A crimson-red carpet rolled out from one of the coaches in the middle. An old man with a fat head and big ears, clad in a golden imperial robe and holding a silver walking stick in his hand, walked out slowly on the carpet. The old man raised his head and looked at Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng. He coughed lightly, then shook his hand and threw a wooden box, about 1 foot in diameter, towards Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng moved his body and dodged the black wooden box. Wu Qi took a step forward, caught the wooden box, and opened it without hesitation. A white silk cloth was placed inside the wooden box, and on top of it was placed a human head, whose skin was red and pale, looking like a living person. Judging from the appearance of the human head, it was a young man in his 20s. He was handsome and valiant, and had the face of a pretty boy. However, when such a handsome face was placed in the wooden box, it gave off a strange aura. Wu Qi's face darkened. He stared at the fat old man and said angrily, "Sending a dead head so early in the morning? Are you trying to bring us bad luck?" The fat old man coughed again, gazed at Wu Qi from the corner of his eyes arrogantly, and said in an indifferent tone, "So, you are Martin. Hee. Until now, no one in G City knows why His Majesty suddenly conferred the title of Marquis to a nobody like you. However, it is said that Marquis Tianyun has a peerless luck, and it seems that it is true." The fat old man sneered, then said in a deep voice, "This human head is the head of Taba Muxiang, the head of my nephew." With a strange expression, the fat old man gazed at Lu Qingfeng, then said, "Duke Yenlu, please tell that mad dog, Qin Qingshui, that I have nothing to do with the death of Duke Yenlu Buji, and that he should never trouble me again. In order for Taba Muxiang to inherit the position left behind by Duke Yenlu, my eldest son, Taba Qingye, was killed. If that Qin Qingshui dares to trouble me again, don't blame me for not letting him go." "Taba Muxiang? Taba Qingye?" Suddenly, Wu Qi knew who this old man was. Chapter 115. The Duke of Xian, Taba Ao, was the current monarch of Xian Kingdom. He was the biological father of Tuoba Haofeng and the dead Taba Qingye, the monarch of Xian Kingdom. He ruled over 38 provinces of Xian Kingdom, 943 magnificent cities, and an army of 1 million armored soldiers. Among the over 100 vassal kingdoms of Great Yan Dynasty, he could be ranked in the top 3. According to the secret files of Scouting Office of Great Yan Dynasty, when Taba Ao was still a child, a rebellion happened in the palace. His mother was poisoned to death, and when Taba Ao was just 2 months old, he was brought out of the palace by a loyal palace maid. The palace maid was hunted down and fell off a cliff, while Taba Ao was raised by a group of moon-howling divine mastiffs until he was 3 years old. Only then was he found by the previous Duke of Xian Kingdom. As he grew up in a group of mastiffs, Taba Ao had a rude and unreasonable nature. Among all the vassals of Great Yan Dynasty, he was the most unreasonable one, and had a murderous nature. Just look at his title. As the Duke of Xian had the name Ao in his name, the imperial clan of Xian Kingdom could do nothing to him. Although the Great Yan Dynasty had some complaints about this, there was nothing they could do to him. Early in the morning today, he brought a group of guards and stormed into Duke Yan Li's mansion, bringing the head of his own nephew to their doorstep. What a barbaric and cruel way of doing things. Wu Qi stared at Taba Ao, whose face was trembling with ferocity. His face turned unsightly. The head of Taba Muxiang in his hand seemed to have become heavy as well. Taba Ao gazed viciously at Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng, then said with a ferocious voice, "Taba Muxiang is the illegitimate son of my sister and Yan Buji. My sister gave birth to a child out of wedlock, and if this news were to spread out, it would be bad for my reputation. Therefore, I raised him in the palace with the identity of a legitimate son. When Yan Buji drowned in the river, I admit that I coveted the title of Duke Yan Lu, and that's why I came up with a plan for Taba Muxiang. Am I wrong?" Clenching his jaws tightly, he glared at Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng, who had an unsightly expression on their faces. Taba Ao grinned hideously and said, "Since Duke Chengfeng is able to inherit the title of Duke Yan Lu, could it be that your hands are completely clean, without any blood stains?" Everyone was the same, so why did they have to hold on to this reason? "For the sake of the title of Duke Yan Lu, my eldest son, Taba Qingye, has been killed by you, and now, I've presented you with the head of the culprit, Taba Muxiang. If anyone dares to pester me with this matter again, don't blame me for being rude to him." Two streams of tears rolled down his cheeks as Taba Ao threw his head back and let out a long cry. "Taba Qingye, Taba Muxiang, you two lowly bastards, you deserve to die." Stamping his feet on the ground, Taba Ao let out a loud shout of, "Damn it," for over 10 times, attracting the attention of all the ministers and princes who happened to be passing by. After that, he slammed his walking stick on the ground, turned around and entered the coach. A loud voice rang out, and the guards of Xiangua entered the carriages one after another. The coachman scolded them, and the black carriages turned around and went back the way they came. Lu Chengfeng was so angry that his face turned blue. He scolded in a low voice, "Domineering, domineering, really unscrupulous. Even though he is the monarch of Xiangua, and is so arrogant and domineering, has he forgotten that Xiangua is also under my rule? His Xiangua is also one of the 37 vassal kingdoms in the west." Then, he stomped his foot on the stairs, shattering a few feet wide stone brick into powder soundlessly. Lu Chengfeng gnashed his teeth and said, "Taba Ao and I will never let go of the humiliation we suffered today. Xiangua, does he think he has the right to present the head of Taba Muxiang to us?" Weighing the head in his hand, Wu Qi casually handed it over to Lu Chengfeng. Lu Chengfeng was stunned, then he took over the head and held it close to his chest. He stared at Wu Qi and said in a low voice, "Sending a head here so early in the morning, could it be that Qin Qingshui has pushed him too hard? But why did Qin Qingshui force him to do something? Do you still remember that night? It was obvious that Qin Qingshui was cooperating with Taba Qingye to set us up. Why is he finding trouble with Taba Ao now? Wu Qi pondered for a while, then he shook his head, frowned and said, Taba Ao said that Qin Qingshui is a mad dog. Who can ever guess his thoughts? Young master, you can go ahead and discuss some important matters in Zhuguojing's mansion. As for the conflict between the Gao Ling Kingdom and the Lishan Kingdom, just drag it out. Wu Qi has some thoughts here, and I'll explain them to young master in detail when I get back. Laughing coldly, Wu Qi nodded his head at Lu Chengfeng, spun and entered Duke Yan Li's mansion. He walked along the wall for a while, glanced to the left and right, then leaped over the wall nimbly, following the main street and chasing towards the direction where Taba Ao's convoy left. Standing in front of the Duke mansion, Lu Chengfeng held the head in his arms and stared blankly for a while. Suddenly, he angrily threw the head over to Yen Fu, asking him to bury it properly. After that, he angrily boarded the coach, brought a large group of guards and headed straight towards the direction of Zhuguojing's mansion. Following closely behind Lu Chengfeng, Yen Bugui subconsciously looked towards the direction where Taba Ao left, then turned to look at Wu Qi's back. Hastily, he gave a signal using a unique hand signal used by secret agents of Scouting Office. A few passers-by on the street who seemed to be passing by unintentionally turned around and left slowly. When they were over 1,000 feet away from Duke Yan Li's mansion, they suddenly sped up and plunged into an alley beside the street, chasing after Taba Ao's convoy. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, through countless large and small networks in G-City, the news of Taba Ao paying a visit to Duke Yanli early in the morning and presenting the head of his nephew, Taba Muxiang, the half-brother of Duke Yanli Lu Chengfeng, had been spread across the entire G-City. Those influential nobles who knew Taba Ao's usual behavior just smiled when they heard the news. The wild temperament of Taba Ao, who was raised in a pack of mastiffs, had once again broken out. Taba Ao's convoy was running amok on the long street of G-City, and countless innocent passers-by had been injured. They had nearly circled half a circle around the 6 inner cities of G-City, passing through several dozens of streets and alleys, and finally came to a stop in a desolate and deserted alleyway. There were already 3 convoys waiting in the alleyway, each with a different appearance and painted with different colors. With a gloomy face, Taba Ao alighted from the coach, randomly picked one of the convoys and got on it. After that, he gave a light shout, and 4 convoys left the alleyway slowly, disappearing into the endless stream of people on the street. The convoy of convoys took a detour on the street for a while, and finally came straight to the clubhouse built by Xian Kingdom in G-City. This was also the place where the hostages of Xian Kingdom usually stayed. Wu Qi wasn't fooled by Taba Ao's camouflage. He kept his eyes fixed on Taba Ao's convoy, quietly following behind him as they circled around G-City. Along the way, he discovered that wherever the convoy passed by, there were at least nearly 1,000 spies observing the movements of Taba Ao's convoy. Wu Qi saw with his own eyes that at least 18 secret agents and informers of Scouting Office were discovered by these informers who had been planted by Xian Kingdom in advance. They were entangled with them with all sorts of methods, causing them to lose control of Taba Ao. Fortunately, Wu Qi had an excellent tracking skill, and he also had an excellent hiding method. As a result, none of the spies of Xian Kingdom could discover his existence. Wu Qi kept his eyes fixed on Taba Ao, and followed him to a mansion located at the northwest corner of the inner second city, which was close to the palace city. The mansion was not big, but it was quiet and secluded. Not far away from it was the office of Great Yan's Scouting Office's Central Wind Guard. The street was densely packed with secret agents of Central Wind Guard and soldiers of G-City's City Defense Army. Most of the people who came and went on this street were officials related to Scouting Office, and some vagabonds in the marketplace. There were all kinds of people, and it looked very complicated. The mansion occupied an area of approximately tens of acres, and the front and back of the mansion were planted with strange pines and cypresses. Ancient trees with trunks that looked like coiling dragons covered the entire mansion. From the outside of the mansion, one could only see the lush greenery that stretched like clouds, and there was no way one could see what was happening in the courtyard. On top of these towering trees, on average, there was a spy clad in a green cloak hiding in each of them. These vigilant spies had formed an impenetrable net, blocking off all possible directions for Wu Qi to sneak in. Yet, there was not a single blind spot for anyone to sneak into the courtyard. Hiding on top of a tall building a few courtyards away, Wu Qi twitched his lips and shook his head helplessly. The defense of this courtyard was indeed impenetrable. If it was Wu Qi 1 month ago, he would have no way to sneak into this place stealthily. But now, laughing coldly, Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture. Abruptly, his body transformed into a sheet of misty green light and shadow, and noiselessly leaped into the air and plunged into a huge tree in the courtyard. After obtaining the innate wood element aura and starting to cultivate the source of wood chapter, Wu Qi was able to exercise the innate wood element escape art. Using the huge trees in the courtyard as his cover, without alerting anyone, he easily sneaked into the courtyard, followed Taba Ao and came to a side courtyard. Underneath a few large pine trees, there was a rack of grapevines growing thickly. Clad in a black brocade robe and barefoot, Qin Qingshui was having his body massaged by 2 beautiful teenage girls. When he heard Taba Ao's footsteps, he lazily opened his eyes, greeted Taba Ao and said, "Duke Xian, how is it going? Now that I've delivered the head of Taba Muxiang to you, you have nothing to do with this matter anymore. Can you put your mind at ease now?" Taba Ao snorted coldly, strode next to Qin Qingshui and sat down on a couch. Fuming with rage, he clenched his fists and growled in a low voice, "When have I, Taba Ao, ever suffered such humiliation in my entire life? Qingye is dead, and in order to clear his name, he even killed Muxiang himself. Hao Feng has also been marked by His Majesty. In the future, he will inherit the throne of the Xian kingdom, and perhaps he will face more troubles." Viciously cursing Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng's 18 generations of ancestors, Taba Ao said furiously, "Qin Qingshui, find a way to kill a few trusted subordinates of that kid, or else, I can't swallow this anger." Qin Qingshui laughed mockingly, threw a sideways glance at Taba Ao, and said, "You should be content with what you have. By sacrificing Taba Qingye and Taba Muxiang, you can easily extricate yourself from this matter. Using the weapons of the City Defense Army and the City Defense Mechanism to assassinate the descendants of the Imperial clan, such a serious crime can be absolved with the death of a son and a nephew. What else do you want from such a cheap thing?" Fiercely grabbing the chest of the girl standing next to him, Qin Qingshui said in a vexed tone, "I still have a big trouble waiting for me. His Majesty has asked me to find out who is the culprit behind this case. But who is the culprit? If I can't find a scapegoat, and am forced to live in seclusion, Duke Xian will become a deaf and blind man in Ji City." Taba Ao's face turned extremely gloomy. He rose to his feet, glared at Qin Qingshui, sneered and said, "No matter what methods you use, you have to deal with this matter properly. I've already lost a son and a nephew. If you are forced to live in seclusion, you have to spit out everything that you've eaten and taken from me all these years. Do you think my gold, silver, jewelry, beautiful girls, and mansions are so easy to enjoy?" He gave Qin Qingshui a fierce glare, whose face had turned dark, then spun and said coldly, "Remember, this matter ends here. Muxiang didn't get the title of Duke Yanlu, so don't drag me into this matter. You, Qin Qingshui, have taken my money, but you didn't help me get the title of Duke Yanlu. I won't ask for the money back, but you have to clean up the mess." Then, Taba Ao strode out from the courtyard and warned with a deep voice, "I don't want His Majesty to know that this matter is related to me. I didn't send anyone to assassinate Yanbuji, and I also didn't send anyone to assassinate the current Duke Yanlu to help Taba Muxiang fight for the title of Duke. All these have nothing to do with me." Taba Ao left the mansion. Qin Qingshui remained silent for a long while, then suddenly clapped his hands and said, "Ying Chuan, come out now. I have something to tell you." Wu Qi, who was hiding in the crown of a huge tree, felt his heart skip a beat. Ying Chuan? Which Ying Chuan? Princess Ying Chuan of the Lu Kingdom. Chapter 116. A sweet moan was heard coming from a small and exquisite abode behind the grape trellis. A fragrant scent drifted in the air as a naked, beautiful lady walked slowly out of the abode. She was clad in a pink veil. It looked like she had just taken a bath, as there were still crystal-clear water droplets on her long hair, and on her exposed chest, there were droplets of water slowly sliding down. From Wu Qi's angle, he couldn't see the lady's face clearly. He could only see her slender waist twisting and turning like a water snake as she came next to Qin Qingshui. Then, she plopped herself down on Qin Qingshui's chest and intimately hugged Qin Qingshui's neck. Then, she gave Qin Qingshui a heavy kiss on his face, then called out intimately, "Grand Marquis Qin, is that fat pig just now the Duke of Xian?" Qin Qingshui pulled off the veil from the lady's body, grabbed and pinched her body with both hands and said, "Cut the nonsense. Among the hanger-ons of Duke of Yen, are Luo Kedi and Ma Liang your former subordinates? Is there any way to control them? If there is, frame Duke Yenlu, push the blame of Yen Buji's murder onto him and his mother's clan. With that, you can solve my current predicament, and you can avoid the disaster of the Lu Kingdom's downfall." Upon hearing Qin Qingshui's words, Wu Qi immediately understood the identity of this beautiful lady. She was indeed Princess Ying Chuan of the Lu Kingdom, the birth mother of Marquis Lu Suifeng, and the former mistress of Luo Kedi and Ma Liang. What was strange was that the Lu Kingdom was very far away from Ji City, and it had only been a little over a month since Lu Qingfeng inherited the title of Duke of Yen. So, how could she arrive at Ji City in such a timely manner? Princess Ying Chuan breathed out a sigh, grumbled bitterly and viciously, "Those two scoundrels who betrayed their master, what can we expect from them? Now that Lu Qingfeng has inherited the title of Duke Yenlu, he has a group of followers from the imperial clan, and he holds great power in his hands. How can Ying Chuan still control them? I think they have long forgotten the look of their mistress." She twisted her body a few times on Qin Qingshui's body, then said with a sweet voice, "Marquis di Qinghui, Grand Marquis, you are the chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard. Can't you fabricate some evidence and push the crime of Yen Buji's murder onto Lu Qingfeng? As long as we can ascertain that it was that bitch, Tai Yuwu, who was the mastermind behind the assassination of Yen Buji, the scouting office will confiscate the entire Tai clan and kill all the people involved." Princess breathed out a sigh. Princess opened her lips and slowly, "Princess. Princess. And Princess Qin. And Princess. From Qin, Yin. And Ling King from the palace, Princess, from the sea, Qin. From Qin, Yu Ling." While gently kissing Qin Qingshui's body, Princess Ying Chuan said with a soft voice, "Before Tai Yuewu returned to the Lu Kingdom, Tai clan had become extremely arrogant. Currently, that old fogey, Mark Yuanyang, is reorganizing his army and preparing for a rebellion. Lord Marquis, the Lu Kingdom gives Lord Marquis so much every year. Lord Marquis must not let the Tai clan take over the Lu Kingdom's foundation." All of a sudden, Princess Ying Chuan kissed Qin Qingshui's vital part. Qin Qingshui's shriveled donkey-like face suddenly turned snow-white. The blood on his face had long been sucked away. His skinny body tensed up as he gritted his teeth and growled in a low voice, "Do you think I don't know? But how am I supposed to frame him? The Lu Kingdom was just a third-rate kingdom among all the vassal kingdoms of Great Yen Dynasty. How could a mere Tai clan have the power to assassinate Yen Buji? Is Yen Buji really that easy to kill? Not only him, but the other former supervisor, rear supervisor, and right supervisor have all been killed 100 times over." Panting heavily, Qin Qingshui held Princess Ying Chuan's head in his arms, clenched his jaws and said, "The lords of the 4 great kingdoms are in charge of the supervision of over 100 vassal kingdoms of Great Yen Dynasty. They hold a high position and hold great power. Countless monarchs of vassal kingdoms have their eyes on them. Not to mention a mere Marquis Yuanyang from your Lu Kingdom, even if Duke of Xian wanted to assassinate Yen Buji, it would not be so easy. The water in this matter is very deep." Wu Qi looked at Qin Qingshui's little body tensed up. He straightened all 10 fingers, then slowly bent them one by one. When Wu Qi bent the last finger, about the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Qin Qingshui's body suddenly trembled, and his snow-white donkey-like face suddenly turned purplish red. Suddenly, hot sweat broke out from his body. Panting heavily, he held Princess Yingchuan's head tightly in his arms. His body was trembling unconsciously, and only after a long while did he let out a moan that sounded like a dying man, and slowly relaxed his body. Princess Yingchuan raised her head up with a charming smile on her face, and just happened to let Wu Qi see half of her face. She was indeed an extraordinarily beautiful woman. Although she had already raised Lu Suifeng, who was a grown-up son, Princess Yingchuan still looked young like a 16-year-old beauty, and her beautiful face was very attractive. Especially her identity as the daughter of the Lu Kingdom's monarch, it could make one's imagination run wild. Lovingly, Qin Qingshui stroked Princess Yingchuan's face and said with a low voice, "It's not going to work if you want to put the blame on them. We need to find a suitable person to do it. His Majesty has already paid attention to the case of Yan Buji's assassination. If I dare to act recklessly in this case and don't come up with some solid and credible evidence, I won't even know how I died one day." Princess Yingchuan's beautiful brows knitted into a tight frown. With a piteous expression, she looked at Qin Qingshui, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Marquis, you're the chief supervisor of the Central Wind Guard of Scouting Office, a person who holds great power in his hand. Can't you find a way to frame someone else? If we don't get rid of that bitch, Tai Yuowu, and the Tai clan behind her, Yingchuan will have no home to return to in the future. If the Lu Kingdom really changes its surname to Tai, what should we do if Marquis changes his name to Yingchuan?" Intentionally or unintentionally, a stream of crystal-clear liquid flowed down from the corner of Princess Yingchuan's mouth. It was unknown what kind of seductive technique she had used, but even Wu Qi, who was lying on top of the tree, could feel his heart skip a beat, and a scorching heat was bursting out from his lower abdomen. Since he had stolen the enormous kidney energies from both of Qin Shuwen's kidneys, the strength of Wu Qi's kidneys had become very strong. As soon as the flame in his heart was ignited, his lower body immediately stood erect like iron, causing Wu Qi, who was lying on top of the tree, to feel extremely uncomfortable. Fortunately, the divine flame of order in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean was extremely magical. As soon as the evil flame was ignited, it immediately emitted a greenish-purple light and shone upon Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. Waves of scorching heat flowed from his spiritual ocean to his entire body, and in just a blink of an eye, it circled 3 times around Wu Qi's body. The flame in his heart that was ignited by Princess Yingchuan's unknown seductive technique was instantly extinguished, and Wu Qi's body quickly returned to normal. Beads of cold sweat broke out on Wu Qi's forehead. The seductive technique of Princess Yingchuan was indeed incredible. While he was praising Princess Yingchuan's seductive technique, a couple of men, clad in green cloaks, suddenly fell down from the branches of a dozen ancient pine trees in the courtyard. Each of these men was staring at Princess Yingchuan with an infatuated look. Some of them even had their faces blushed, howling and leaping towards Princess Yingchuan. Princess Yingchuan let out a soft cry, as her petite body suddenly curled up into a ball and shrunk into Qin Qingshui's arms. Qin Qingshui flew into a rage. He snapped sternly, "A bunch of useless fools. What's the use of me keeping you here? Do you think I want you to make a fool of yourselves here? Drag them out and punish them with 300 sticks. Drag them out and punish them with 500 sticks." A group of beast warriors of Scouting Office rushed into the courtyard like a pack of wolves and tigers. They grabbed these spies who fell down from the trees and dragged them out of the courtyard. Very soon, muffled noises of heavy sticks hitting on flesh could be heard coming from outside the courtyard. Those spies who fell down from the trees because of the seductive technique let out miserable cries. But very soon, their cries disappeared without a trace. In just a few words, dozens of spies had been beaten to death. Lying in Qin Qingshui's arms, Princess Yingchuan kept praising Qin Qingshui's manly spirit and heroic character with a sweet voice. Meanwhile, Wu Qi kept shaking his head while lying on top of a tree. Under such an order, how did Qin Qingshui, the chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard, manage to hold his position so firmly? If not for the fact that he was the lineal descendant of Qin Huang, perhaps he would have long been kicked out of his position, and his life might even be in danger. No matter how Qin Qingshui managed his subordinates, after listening to the secret discussion between him, Princess Ying Chuan, and Taba Ao, Wu Qi could roughly guess the role Qin Qingshui was playing in this matter. Taba Ao was bent on fighting for the title of Duke Yenlu, but Lu Chengfeng was the first one who came to Ji City. Therefore, Taba Ao came to Qin Qingshui, asking him to help him kill Lu Chengfeng, so that Taba Muxiang could be promoted to the position of Duke Yenlu. That was the reason why Taba Qingye lured and killed Lu Chengfeng, and Qin Qingshui chose to help Taba Qingye by arresting Lu Chengfeng on the spot. After Lu Chengfeng had successfully inherited the title of Duke, Yan Dan began to pay attention to the case of Yan Buji's murder. In order to clear his name, Taba Ao hastily killed Taba Muxiang as a sign to Lu Chengfeng. At the same time, without any sense of loyalty, he asked Qin Qingshui to clean up all the loose ends himself. At the same time, Princess Ying Chuan came to Qin Qingshui. Supposedly, both of them were old lovers. As Lu Chengfeng had inherited the title of Zhuguijing and Duke Yenlu, Tai Yuewu's mother's family had begun to sharpen their blades in the Lu Kingdom, planning to strike the monarch of the Lu Kingdom. In order to save herself, Princess Ying Chuan had to deal with Lu Chengfeng. But with her identity as the daughter of the monarch of a third-tier vassal kingdom, how could she deal with Lu Chengfeng, the Duke of Yenlu? Helpless, Princess Ying Chuan could only beg Qin Qingshui to frame Lu Chengfeng. However, with Yan Dan personally paying attention to the case of Yan Buji's assassination, even if Qin Qingshui had 100 guts, he would not dare to frame someone recklessly. Princess Ying Chuan kept acting coquettishly in Qin Qingshui's arms, begging and using all kinds of flirtatious methods, hoping that Qin Qingshui would agree to help her deal with Lu Chengfeng. Even if she could not kill him, she could at least get Lu Chengfeng to promise her that Tai clan would not go too far in the Lu Kingdom. After acting coquettishly for a while, Princess Ying Chuan finally told him her bottom-line condition: if Tai clan could behave themselves and not try to usurp the monarch's position, the monarch of the Lu Kingdom would even be willing to cede half of the kingdom to Tai clan, allowing them to establish their own kingdom. Qin Qingshui just gave Princess Ying Chuan a vague answer with the name of Yan Dan. For the whole morning, both of them had made love on the bed for a few times, naked. Qin Qingshui had taken all the advantage, and Princess Ying Chuan had tried her best, yet she still couldn't win a single promise from Qin Qingshui. Qin Qingshui had vented his desire on Princess Ying Chuan for a total of 7 to 8 times, and at last, he did not even have the strength to lift his finger. Only then did he put his arms around Princess Ying Chuan, laughed and gave her an idea. All right, I'm being watched by His Majesty. Scouting office can't cover the sky with one hand in Great Yan Dynasty, as Gao Jianli, the Prime Minister, still has a secret spy office that has the right to supervise scouting office. Qin Qingshui breathed out a sigh, kissed Princess Ying Chuan's cheek, and said with a low voice, with a swallow, keeping an eye on him, I can't simply frame Lu Chengfeng and convict him. If you want to protect the Lu Kingdom, just do as I say. First, go find the patriarch of Imperial Clan, Duke Yanxing, Yuxian, and then. Qin Qingshui moved his mouth close to Princess Ying Chuan's ear, using the technique of divine sense, and gave her a secret instruction. Princess Ying Chuan's body turned stiff, and her face turned extremely unsightly. However, Qin Qingshui didn't bother to consider what Princess Ying Chuan was thinking. After taking a few more liberties with her, he put on his clothes with the help of 2 young girls, then left without paying any attention to Princess Ying Chuan. All the spies in the mansion followed him out of the courtyard. Even the corpses of the dozen or so spies who had been killed were cleaned up. Princess Ying Chuan lay on the bed and stared blankly for a while. Suddenly, she let out an evil laugh and began cursing under her breath. Qin Qingshui, Ying Chuan is going to wipe out your entire clan. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.